All right, it's 5 o'clock, so I will call our joint planning board and city council meeting to order. I will turn it over to Bill for the approval of the consent agenda, since that is a planning thing.
Thank you. A little quick business here on the consent for the planning commission meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the January 18th.
I'll make a motion.
Second it.
And second it. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
We're kind of short.
That carries.
Do you have a quorum? We have 3 people here.
Katie, can you hear us?
We got one.
Katie should be on.
Yeah, she's on.
Katie's won't come.
I am here.
Okay.
She's incoming.
She's on.
Okay.
Teamster.
We're just missing Randy though. Yeah, so we got one.
Okay. Then we have the draft zoning ordinance. Zoning ordinance is something that Jennifer's been working on for as long as I've been in city government. I would say beyond 5, probably.
Well, Preston's 15, or 16 now, and I started it with 2 administrators prior to start.
Something that I've been talking to Jennifer about, hoping to finish here. So that was the last of our ordinance codification process that was started before I came on board. So finishing it out is the zoning ordinance. I thought we should get it done. Well, we're here with a proposal. It's essentially a brand new ordinance. I have some thoughts. I know Bill said you have some thoughts. I don't know if you want to kick it off.
I certainly can.
Okay.
I'm just going to put this on record once, and then I'll shut up about it the rest of the evening. But I just was disappointed that it came to me as not a red line highlighted proposal. You know, in any other, and I realize it's been a long process, but truly, after we did the codification and we had to go back and have them spend $2,000 to create a red line copy, I really feel like going forward, I really encourage the city administrator to kind of just make that's just how it needs to be, where if you're going to create a 92-page document, I want it to come to me with everything that's going to be stricken with a red line through it, any text that's going to be added, highlighted. And I just think about how much easier that would have not only made the 10 or 11 hours that I have into this document, but even this 3-hour meeting that we're going to have. I just think about how much easier it would be if we could go through here and clearly see text that's going to be stricken and clearly see text that's going to be added. So I'll shut up about it. I just needed to share that I really hope in the future that would be the process that we would go next time.
Yeah, no, I see your point. I mean, this document, like Jennifer said, has been going on for years, where there's been several iterations made to it, but I understand your point of having a red line version versus the final version, being able to compare.
So what I did, because that's how I wanted to view it, Jennifer was kind enough, thank you, to print out for me the original, or as best as she could, because I understand that there's maybe a couple different forms or formats. And then I spent about 4 hours yesterday going through and looking at the things that I had already been concerned about and comparing them and trying to know what is new and old. And it's a lot of work that, in my opinion, wouldn't have had to have happened. That's all. So I appreciate letting me voice that opinion. And I do appreciate all the work that was put into it. I truly do. Don't take that as personal, because it is not. Thank you. So I have no idea how the format goes here.
Well, I'll just say there were 2 things that I wanted to touch on. This is something where I sat down with Jennifer, Bill, and Tarek once a draft was submitted. We talked about some changes that I thought might make sense, and then that's where we got to where we are. There's one piece later in the document. Now it's coming again. Okay. That's on page 69, and this is the Shoreland Overlay District, section 36-50. As a matter of course, the city defines impervious surface as any area covered by a building. Impervious surface doesn't constitute parking lots or anything like that. I think that for purposes of the shoreline overlay district, we should include impervious surfaces to be parking lots and anything else where water does not flow into the soil. If the purpose of the shoreline overlay is to prevent things from getting into the river and minimize water runoff and things like that, then we should look at counting all impervious surfaces, not just buildings. And maybe then the 30% should be upped to 50 or 55 to make up for that. But my thought is, if we're going to serve the purpose of this section, which is protecting the integrity of the water supply, then we should look at counting impervious surface as anything where the water does not soak into the subsoil, which would be parking lots. And that's something that in other areas, we don't do that. So in the rest of the ordinance, it would remain as is. But this is a special section dedicated to protecting the integrity of the river. If there's any disagreement with that, or if anyone has anything they'd like to add.
I would say, obviously, it's near and dear to my heart because I obviously have a large section of shoreline overlay. And I would start by questioning the 300 feet, whether that's something we even have the ability to alter or not, or if that's just created by the state or DNR. I have no idea. But what I see here in the E number 1, it actually was added from the original text, is this buffer impact zone. And, I can understand trying to protect the buffers, the actual river structure. I get it, and that makes perfect sense. But that 300 feet goes all the way to the front of my building, and it all seems a little ridiculous, just for what it's worth. That 300 feet is, that's a lot of ground. You look at the farmers and the buffer zones that they're required, and I'm pulling this out of an orifice, but I want to say it's like 50 feet, from when they're doing agricultural work. So I just truly question the 300 feet, and I don't know if it's something we can address or if it's beyond our scope of control.
Those definitions of footages are federal regulations.
I was afraid of that.
I was pretty sure of that.
So, yeah, in my opinion, I'd like to see it go the other way. I'd like to see it not change to an impervious surface, not to change that definition. I'd like to see that 30% be at 50% similar to other areas zoned. That's, obviously, I'm somewhat biased.
So currently, right now, in residential, you cannot exceed 40% lot coverage. In commercial, it's 50%, but in C1, there isn't a lot coverage.
At C1, it's 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in either of those, at 40%, we're only looking at building structure, not driveway, sidewalk.
It is, and one of the reasons is we actually talked to Ron Mergen about it extensively throughout the years. It's a calculation nightmare. Because people are going to be trying to calculate their parking pads and their sidewalks. And if you look at where the future of our city is going, if we ever jump the river, all those properties will be affected along the north side of the river. So there would be a definite impact. However we change it, there's going to be a definite impact in the future.
It looks like, from what I can tell, that the main, thing behind the impervious surfaces is to prevent flooding in most regulations. And it's just, the crazy weather we've had lately, I don't know, every year it's like, what's happening now? We've just said there's been so many records set for floods and things like that. Not here necessarily, but in a lot of the Midwest, and it might be something worth looking at. I'm not sure until I look into it further how much it would affect and how realistic that situation would be, but I think it's worth looking into.
Well, I don't know, maybe this is a simple way of looking at it, but I think generally, when you're in that area that is part of this, the definition that we're talking about, shoreline, I mean, typically in these areas by rivers and streams, the water within that is gonna go there. It's just a matter of how fast it goes there. To me, the concern is maybe less about flooding and more about stuff washing in.
Yeah.
You know, by speed of water going across parking lots and stuff like that. Like that would be the evil that you'd be more likely to address by creating a regulation on impervious surfaces. But I mean, I think it's doubtful that you're gonna slow down water very much, because in most situations, I think that's where it's going, and it's just a question of how fast. Might make difference of a day, but it isn't gonna make much difference. If we get that much moisture, it's gonna go there.
Well, and if it is a serious, hazard issue anyway, then if it's not an impervious surface, it'll just sink into the ground, and we'll have to deal with that as well.
It's still probably gonna get there, but it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just looking into it really briefly here, it looks like most of the regulations that most places have it is to deal with runoff and a flooding issue. So I just kind of wondered, I hadn't thought of that. I was thinking more along the lines of what you're saying with the hazards. So I guess that would have to be kind of a question, like what would it affect and what is the likelihood that it would flood? Because it looks like most impervious surfaces in most places, they don't have that building thing. It does count parking lots and everything already. So that's why I would just be curious to know how that would affect things.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I don't have a map, so I'm just going off of memory and geographic memory here, but like AMPI, a good chunk of their property must be in the shoreline overlay district.
Yeah, let me go scroll down.
I would imagine.
Yeah,
I think Dollar General,
Yeah.
some places like that where.
And we're gonna have a large number of people who are grandfathered into this change. But it's a protection going forward as far as I'm concerned.
but it also impacts the people that already own that property from expanding or adding it. Yeah, think about, even like Ron Bergen is probably in that zone. Does he still live back by the river there?
Yep.
So, it comes down to a question of, gee, can he cement his driveway? Can he add a garage or add on a room to his house? So it does impact. It impacts real folks, and I question the benefit of it all. Let's put it that way. I just don't see. It seems like a burden to folks, and I don't see the payback. I mean, I can see this bluff impact zone, and I was happy to see that verbiage added, but, because that's, in my opinion, where we can make a difference, but to affect something 300 feet away from the water's edge is questionable benefit, in my opinion.
The shoreline is all your,
I don't see the 300 feet.
It's in the very first part of 3650.
That's federal language, the 300 feet.
300 feet and 1,000 feet, yeah.
It's under 36A2.
Okay.
Page 6.
well, what is the buffer 50 feet?
It didn't, what it says, the new verbiage that was added in E1 on page 69 is, however, structures and accessories, facilities, except stairways and landings shall not be placed in the bluff impact zone. But I honestly don't know, I mean, I can visualize what a bluff impact zone is, but I don't know how the city actually defines a bluff impact zone. I mean, for me, when I say that word, it's when I fall off the back of my property down the hill.
I didn't see stuff in a buffer, I thought it was 50 feet.
And that is a definition we don't have, so that's maybe something we need to define.
I would say if you're gonna have it in here as part of the ordinance, it probably should be defined.
I agree. I was just looking to see if it was in there, and it's
And
not.
I would think, it should be defined as, where the topography falls off in, at a rapid pace from prior river erosion. Because that's really what created that, that if the river hadn't flowed there, my property would continue all the way to the other side. But where the water has eroded and created a bank, that's what I would call the bluff impact, or the bluff zone. Anyway. So, yeah, I guess we just respectfully disagree on that one. So
That's fine, I figured we might.
Yeah.
I just look at it as what, we have this here to prevent damage to the river. And if somebody can go out and just pave a parking lot that slopes right towards the river, that covers 100% of their property, why do we have this? Why are we protecting the river from a building, but not a parking lot? And if we're not going to protect it from a parking lot, then what are we doing? And I think that's probably where we disagree. But I think we need to limit it. Maybe it should be 50 instead of 30, because you're right, it will prevent people from expansion. So maybe it should be a little bit bigger. But I don't think that we should permit the paving of a parking lot so that 100% of the land mass is covered when we're looking at protecting a water supply.
And I tend to agree with it when you state it like that. What I would be concerned about is, I would hate to see a differential of how the area is, how the math is done based on the zone, because that gets messy. So I don't, you know what I'm saying? And
I do, and Jennifer and I have had the conversation about let's count it on all properties. And I said, well, why don't we just count it on Charlotte?
that gets messy. But, you know, if you did it, yeah, I don't know what to tell you on that one.
If we did it, that's gonna be another regulation that those people that are in that zone are gonna have to comply by. It's another, I don't wanna say hoop, but it's another hoop that they're gonna have to, you know, abide by, where the other zones that are outside the shoreline district don't have as many things to check boxes on, I guess. And if that's something that you desire, then that's a buyer beware thing. You know, you have to come and you have to investigate your property before you buy it. And just to know everything on the north side of that river, though, that hopefully someday will be developed, are going to be.
Yeah. And I have to correct myself in my earlier statement, because it would appear that API is not at all in the shoreline.
But 100% of work except one little corner is.
Yeah. Lucky. And again, buyer beware, because I didn't even know about it until I was informed. So.
What if, let's say the buffer is 50 feet? What if we made it 75? What would that do?
What do you, I don't know what you're talking about, the buffer.
Well, it's a state.
Bluff impact zone?
Yeah, you gotta have grassy area on each side of even a small creek. I believe it was 50 feet on each side. It was Governor Dayton.
But that's for ag, that's for like having your cows or something, right? Or
Yeah, it's for farmland. Yeah.
So, yeah, because here it says that things should not be placed in the bluff impact zone, but we don't have a working definition of what that is. So,
I don't think you can define a bluff impact zone by distance. I mean, I think it's going to be by grade. You know, it's going to be, it's not the same thing as a little creek running through a farm, which is, I think, more what the farm stuff is dealing with.
But, you know, you're talking about spraying Roundup and pesticides and everything else, you know, and then, you know, how much worse or better is that, you know, my Jeep dripping a drop of oil in my parking lot, and you're right, it goes, when it rains, it goes in the river. I'm not gonna argue at that point, but I don't know how, you know, how that changes. I don't see the apples to apples of that. It would appear that to me that a 50-foot, you know, wide swath that you're spraying pesticides on is, in my opinion, would be worse, but.
I think it has more to do with percolation rate, or if it's concrete, it's gonna flow.
Okay.
Or if it's not concrete, it's pervious surface, it's gonna be able to percolate before it flows. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, you know, ultimately, and this is way beyond the scope of this evening, but, you know, maybe at some point there needs to be looked at a stormwater in that area. Maybe there needs to be some kind of stormwater plan, you know, that's implemented. You know, so if you, let's say you wanted to have 100% of the property, then maybe as part of that permitting process, you need to have a stormwater mitigation plan.
The DNR does define it as the bluff and land located within 20 feet from the top of the bluff. So
And then
That's
there's
the DNR, but that doesn't, I mean.
But it still doesn't define how, I mean, it still doesn't help you with how you define the bluff.
there is a definition for that as well.
There is, oh
It's
yes,
pretty
it is,
lengthy.
it's all up.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't think that that's just, so we have an idea of maybe what other people are going by, if it matters. Because they also differentiate between the bluff impact and the shore impact zone, so that would be a lot of jargon.
So we do implement the stormwater plans once you disturb 1 acre of land. MPCA has imposed that, so larger lots, bigger developments, the minute that you disturb 1 acre, you're automatically into that. You have to provide water runoff, water retention, water, ponds, rain gardens, things like that.
So when Firch develops the other side, they will be required. So
Yep.
it kind of helps that process at least.
And then, of course, we have a few of the regional ponds, like would be the northeast corner of Savages. There's a regional pond there to help with some of that water.
Well, I think even all the residential developments, like Willow had to have a pond, I mean, so that in recent years, that's been a requirement.
There's a pond right next to the Green Roof Area Center. There's a pond there for that Opportunity Park. There's a pond out beach near Mr. Lang's property on the north edge of Airport View, where the funeral home is. It's a stormwater pond there.
And I even, not that it matters, but I even tried to do my part. I added wood chips to the back of my lot so that we actually wouldn't have runoff, so that it would go back there and percolate through rather than run back in. So, for whatever that's worth.
Well, I'm going to move to the other thing that caught my eye, and then we'll
So
circle
before we
back.
move on, should we make a determination on what we're going to do with this?
I was going to leave it stew unless somebody wants to make a motion or some sort of declarative statement.
I didn't know how the format worked, and I don't know my role here, so.
I would say I'm confident everybody knows where I stand. I feel I'm confident in knowing where Bill stands.
I guess I don't know if we want to be making motions, otherwise are we just going to?
I'd prefer to come to a consensus and
And
then,
that's fine, but then I think we should come to a consensus on this item before we get to the next. Otherwise, it'll be an undone item that we're going to forget about.
all right, well then I'll just take an informal poll starting at the end and working down towards Josh. Neil, what are your thoughts?
I guess I'd feel a little better at a little higher percentage, up to 50.
Then count all impervious or just,
Yes.
okay? Megan?
I would like more time to look into it, but I guess my gut feeling is that, I guess the farther the better, as far as, impervious surface goes, but again, I don't have a solid stance as yet.
I hear that as support for counting all impervious.
Yes.
Tentatively.
Yes.
Okay. Jean?
Well, I agree, I think it should be 50%. I'm not sure about counting all of the parking lot impervious, because I'm not sure that's a good way to go.
If we bump it to 50%, that's going to put it greater than other areas of the city, if we're not counting all impervious. Because residential is currently at 40. So this was at 30, knowing that we only count the building structure. Okay?
Okay. I can go either way on the,
Okay.
yeah.
Bill, can I put words in your mouth and say that you want to leave it as is, except maybe change it to 100?
Nope. I would like it to be non-differential from what it's zoned. So if it's zoned residential, you said that was 40%?
Yes.
If it's zoned, what are some of the other examples? What's 50%? Is there something zoned?
Industrial.
If it's industrial, it should be 50%. It shouldn't be different simply because it's in the shoreland overlay district.
Okay. Tarek, you're not a voting member, but we're not taking a vote. So where are you?
Well, I'm not cheating. I think we should count the impervious, but keep it at the same percentage.
Okay.
So, just so I understand, so it should be 30%, but you should count the parking lots and the sidewalks and buildings.
Yes.
Bill, do you know if, is gravel parking lot considered pervious or impervious?
Impervious.
Impervious.
So all your industrial parks up there that have class 5, that's all going to count as impervious surface.
Yep.
Katie, do you have thoughts?
Yes, and I'll try not to cough on you. I think, so impervious would be including the sidewalks and the parking lots and all the hard materials, including the buildings, correct?
So the way it's currently structured, only the building is counted. And we're trying to debate whether or not for the shoreland overland district, if we should count all impervious surfaces, but perhaps increase the total permitted area from 30 to 50%, since we're counting more than we would otherwise count in any other part of the city.
And residential currently as it is 40, including impervious?
40, but only counting the building structure.
Not the driveway.
I think that we should be protecting our water. And so I would like to see the 300 feet that was mentioned before, but then also keep it at 30% and include the impervious surfaces.
Thank you. Josh?
I would probably keep it at 50%.
Okay.
Coverage, including the driveways.
So bump it to 50, but count the driveways? Okay. Well, we don't have a full consensus, but I think there's majority support for bumping to 50%, but counting all impervious surfaces. Okay? Is it fine if we do it like this, Jennifer, or would you prefer motions?
Oh,
Okay. All right, the other thing that I had, and I'm sorry I don't have the page number, I'll try and find it, but towards the beginning, we spent quite a bit of time talking about required number of parking spaces. And I think that whole section should just be deleted. That if people can't build something with enough parking spaces, then they're not gonna get enough customers to come to their store.
Yep.
And,
Page 15.
15, thanks, Bill. 15.
15.
People aren't gonna have enough customers coming to them, and if on-street parking becomes an issue, then we have ways of dealing with that nobody wants to think about doing in Painesville, but we could do something like meters. But I think that it helps us build a more pedestrian and bike-friendly city if we go away from mandated parking lots and into more of a free market type of thing when it comes to parking.
And would that also include if someone wanted to build a house and went to Brad for a building permit, that they would not need to have, because right now, number one is single family, two family. Would there would be no off-street parking requirement?
That's correct, because I don't think there's anything in the building code that requires that.
It's not in the building code, no, but we do have parking ordinances, so they can put
I mean,
it on the ground.
they do a ticket every day.
Right.
Right, during the winter, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all for more freedom.
We agree.
I think it may prove problematic, but you're right. I think ultimately if someone's building something, then they need to make that decision or suffer the consequences.
I think, unfortunately, the problem is the consequences are usually paid by somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem with not making people build to the capacity of what they're gonna use is the neighbors suffer. And I just think it's poor planning, to allow that to happen, but.
So I'm against Sean, and Sean knows that. And I have a prime example. We have this beautiful grandstand off of Burr Street. And when we filled that grandstand with these tournaments, we got a lot of complaints, Public Works and the cops had to go out and restripe areas and put up signage and talk to the baseball association because people were parking on Burr Street and Circle Pines and Ponderosa and Spruce. If we would have told the school that they did not have to put in the parking that they did, we would even have more of that. If parking lots cost a ton of money, but if we do not make people put in parking lots, they won't, and you will have your entire residential neighborhoods complaining. Right now, we have a huge parking lot for the high school, and now 63 parking spaces are reserved for the PAC. The kids can't even park there. So, just a side note, I mean, if we do not have parking, like there's an elementary wrestling tournament that fills the entire north and south lot, and plus they're still parked out towards the Dairy Queen, past the former A&W. If we do not have parking, we're going to have issues.
And so I'll comment on what's changed. So let's talk about what's law now versus what this is proposing, because I have notes here. So on the single family, two family, so we're talking J number 1, that was double. That was 1, someone wants to make it 2. Number 3, multiple family dwellings, was 1.5, is now 2. On number 5, 1.5, so it's at least 1 parking space for each 3 1/2, it was 4. On number 9, elderly, senior citizens, it wants to be going, the change would make it 3/4, it was half. The only one that I found that dramatically changed and went the other direction was car washes, and that kind of makes sense because 19I was 10. Automatic drive-through, a minimum of 10 spaces for vehicles waiting, and that was changed to 2. So some increases and 1 significant decrease. I personally would be okay with leaving it as is, not going with the new. I like the way it was versus, I was concerned, and this was one of the things that I wanted to touch on. I was concerned about J1. I don't think it's right that a single-family house should be required to have 2 spots. I think 1 would be sufficient, and that's what the law currently is, so I would be concerned about it doubling.
In all honesty, that single-family homes in a new development is probably gonna be covered in the covenants anyway.
True.
I think it was increased because to get away from trying to have to issue tickets for snow ordinance. So that if we have a lot of single-family dwellings, not that a lot of people will build single-stall garages anymore, or not far enough where 2 cars can't be behind each other, but trying to make sense of, we do have the snow ordinance, you want to make sure all your vehicles are off of it so that you're not having to move it, find a place for it, things like, or parking just in your front yard, I guess.
But anybody that builds is not gonna, they're gonna have 2 spaces. I think we could get rid of that line for sure. Single family, 2 family, or townhouse, they're not gonna add to them now if they only have 1 spot per unit now.
So we would stricken the single family and just have it for the commercial stuff, the hospitals, the boarding rooms, and multifamily, is that what you're saying, Gene? Or
Well, for sure, number 1, get rid of it, because I can't see that's gonna be necessary.
And I'll just say, and I don't know what in the world happened to the binder that I had where I made all of my notes on, but I had started going through and just striking out the ones that I thought we could do away with. And by the end of it, I said, you know what, this is stupid, let's just get rid of the whole thing. And just get rid of all of the parking requirements. And we would not be the first city in Minnesota to do that. The most obvious and biggest example is the city of Minneapolis did it. And as far as I know, it's been working out okay. We are, of course, not Minneapolis.
Yeah, for one thing, we don't have one parking lot. Count how many parking lots Minneapolis has. We have 0. It's a big difference in terms of how you're handling your parking. They have ramps, they have lots, surface lots. They're a totally different situation than we are in terms of parking options.
And then just
Minneapolis
to
also
complete
allows
the,
chickens.
She said Minneapolis also allows chickens.
They what?
They allow chickens.
Okay.
But like, for instance, number 7, it says medical, dental, or hospital outpatient. I mean, our dental office is on, it says one spot for 110 square feet. Well, they don't have any, except what's on the street. You can't really require it if we don't have
Well,
it.
we have a lot of things that are,
Yeah.
that are grandfathered in and under our ordinance. It's not the only thing. There's lots of examples.
but it's interesting you should bring that up, Gene, because the dental office is, where Yahtzee Construction.
Yeah, they're moving.
So, it would impact because they're changing that to, so that does come into play. I just wanted to finish up by saying number 20, 21, and 22 are all new. So those 3 are not currently law, and we're being asked to approve that, the school parking and group homes.
So just for the sake of argument, let's take Opportunity Park next to Quick Trip. Say a dentist office moves in and doesn't provide parking. We're gonna assume they're gonna park on the street?
And as much as I like the idea of freedom, I tend to agree somewhat with Jennifer makes that point, and after hearing that argument, you make a valid point. So, what concerned me mostly was this number 1. If I'm a business and I'm creating a business where I'm having people come to, then I would expect to be told how many parking spots to create, but I was concerned mostly about number 1, which is a private homeowner.
I'm less concerned with 1, in part because I think that any new business or any new public that's going in is going to have a minimum of 2 car garage. What I don't want to see is any new business development in Painesville turning into just a sea of parking lots like you see if you drive into Wake Park. You drive into Wake Park and it's just parking lots on each side of the road. I want, in Painesville, our businesses should be at the front. And if that means a couple cars on the street, maybe parking in back, but let's put the businesses forefront. We're a small community, people walk, they bike around town. We don't have to be car-centric. And I think
I find that comment humorous. People complain if they have to walk 3 parking spaces to a business.
So
They're not really a walking community that I can tell.
So I'm going to defer that to Gene and Neil, because they both were on the council when we had a harem of people in here complaining about no parking.
No parking.
And then people parking, so if people were parking in front of Jean's business, then Jean would complain about people parking in front of her business that were using shrubs. And then it would just be a snowball effect. People that were from Zapp's were parking in front of Corner Drug. So, I don't have any power, but I'm just telling you, in the years past, parking has been a contentious thing.
It's been, yeah.
It could be an issue.
if we see the revitalization of downtown that we hope to see, it's going to be again.
Yeah.
Because that hasn't been addressed, it hasn't been resolved. So it will be again. There's only one way to address it,
And the
put up
only-
some meters.
Yeah, and the only thing I have ever been told is it's a public street, it's downtown, they can park anywhere they want. And basically, we don't have any say downtown.
Well, it says with the exception of the offices in C1, so C1
Is commercial downtown, yeah.
I understand, that there would be the frustration there, and I am a walker, but, I just, what are the solutions? It's not like we have these big open spaces where we could have a parking lot, and we just don't. There's not, what are we gonna do? I don't feel like they're, Sean, that they're seeing meters. Or I'd be fine knocking down that old grocery store beside trucks and making a parking lot over there personally.
There is a parking lot there.
Yeah, making it just a big old parking lot.
City should have bought it.
But, yeah, bought it for parking. I feel like the return on that investment was probably, but other than that, I mean, what's the alternative? Besides
Downtown,
use?
I don't know.
I don't think it's an issue downtown.
Well-
I think
Not
right
really.
now, the parking is okay.
And everybody likes to park right in front of the post office. I'll drive around the block so I can get in the first 3 spaces instead of have to walk a block. I think the parking lot you're just talking about, I'm not gonna park there and walk to the post office.
I think the only way we would really develop a big downtown parking problem would be if we were, and it would be great if it would happen. I think if some things were redeveloped into housing, that would create a parking issue downtown, but it would be good for downtown. I mean, if people live downtown, it would.
And if that would happen, then we would have to readdress it. We would
Well,
have to
I don't
fix
know
it.
how you would address it. I mean, it would be too late because it would be done. I mean, by the time.
No, what
No,
you do,
it could be like Fortitude and have underground parking.
Well, that's possible.
But that's the new,
Yeah,
But if
yeah,
you go
that-
out there, doesn't it?
but I've always said, I mean, what we could do too is like that block between my building and Kay's could be vacated and that could be parking easily.
what's gonna happen.
Because it's not even, I mean, there are options.
I suppose, but I mean, that would be a logical place for residential too. I mean, if you were gonna build something residential downtown, that would be a logical place for it.
But that would have built-in parking requirements as residential, right?
Not if we get
Not if
rid
it's
of it.
not if it's in downtown, there's no parking requirements.
No. Because a lot of people don't park. I have 4 apartments and only 3 people need cars, we need 1. So,
It's been quiet from that end of the table.
how do you
I
feel?
guess I can
Richard?
see the concern with the school and stuff.
I
I
can,
think downtown, like you say, is an issue right now.
I would worry if we'd get another business like the Legion and we don't make them put in parking. You get a wedding and you got 300 people, where are you gonna put them?
They're not gonna do that. I mean, any business that's gonna build is gonna want parking for their customers.
Do you know how many times that Brad have to sit in front of somebody and say, you need these many spaces? Well, I don't want to put in that many spaces. I only want to put in half of that.
And then, like you say, the Legion, I mean, it is a rare occasion when they don't have enough parking, but it happens somewhat regularly, and right now it's great because they just park at the old store, where nobody is, but if that was a busy enterprise there, that would be bad, but, it works out right now. But I mean, when they have events, they have inadequate parking for big events, weddings, the DU banquet, things like that. People are parked on the street and in the next lot. But, I mean, you can't foresee the 100-year flood, which I guess is what I'm talking about. When they have their biggest banquets of the year, it's not big enough, but it's big enough for most things. But I mean, that's all you can try to do in these ordinances, is try to address, 90% of the situations. You're never going to get them all right, but, you try.
Jennifer or Brad, if either of you could answer this question. On number 16, funeral homes establishment, at least 30 parking spaces. When they built the new funeral home, was that, right now, the law says 20. Does anybody know what did they do that, was it based on 20? I mean,
If I remember correctly, they just squeezed in what they needed.
and I'm just gonna, I can't make a motion, but I'm gonna just make a suggestion, and maybe people can yay or nay or just comment on this. I would recommend that we strike number 1, which is personal property, single family, and accept everything else, with the only change being 16. I would like to see that stay at 20. That 30 spaces seems excessive to me personally. When I look at Daniel Funeral Home, if that parking lot was a third, 33% bigger, it just seems a little excessive.
Last visitation I was at, I wish it would have been a third bigger.
I was gonna
Say that
say,
again?
Winners, I think that's like 30.
Well, the one up here at the corner of the bend, they
Yeah.
never have enough parking.
Never.
It actually becomes dangerous going around that corner.
Yeah, but they don't have 20
They don't do
either.
that.
They don't, yeah, no. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
20 is just usually the family. If you think about 20 vehicles,
Okay.
my family would take up 20 vehicles if I had to go to a visitation, if it was my family member.
And it seems more and more people are having a celebration of life at the funeral home instead of having the actual funeral at a
Okay.
church, so.
I retract that, but I would like to see one stricken. Other than that, I'd be okay with the new proposal.
Okay? And I will say, I disagree with Jennifer, but I get 100% where you're coming from, so if I die alone on this hill, so be it. Randy, thanks for joining us. I think you're part of it. So we'll just do an informal poll like we did last time. Bill, I got you as keep it the same, but strike number 1.
That is correct, sir.
Neil?
It's in the new one.
No, yeah, keep it as an, adopt the new proposal.
Okay.
Except strike number
The
1.
new- Yeah, yeah.
So just take out on 15, number 1J.
That's what I'd like to see myself.
Or you mean, leave it at 1 instead of 2 spaces?
I would like to take it out completely, strike
Me too.
personal property. I have a huge difference between a business owner and having customers and making money and someone with their own house. I just, maybe they want to park in the grass and they should have the right to do that.
We're telling you can't park on the street. We're not telling you where you have to park, just not on the street.
Just not on the street,
And
right?
not on your neighbor's property.
And not on your neighbors.
Really?
Not unless the neighbor says you can.
I'm a little concerned on one with your townhomes and two-family units not having enough. You know,
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, I just don't know
your
how you,
twin townhome or,
can you just take out single family?
yeah, that's what I prefer because
I
you could
agree.
easily have 4 to 6 cars at a twin home.
I tend to agree with you, sorry, I'm feeling pretty wishy-washy here, but you guys all make such
spaces per
good
unit.
sense.
I'm gonna start calling you a flip-flopper.
Yeah.
But the single family I'm fine with, and the rest I guess I would leave for,
Okay? Megan?
I agree. Twin homes should have at least, a space apiece, so, but, single family, I just assume leave alone, I suppose.
Gene?
Yeah, we'll get rid of the single family and leave the rest the same.
Okay. I still like the idea of getting rid of it all, but I see where this is going. Randy, just to give you a purview, we're just taking a look through the revised ordinance. We've talked a little bit about, well, I said a little bit, we're 48 minutes into this, about parking requirements and the shoreline overlay district. We're not motioning on anything, we're just sort of trying to reach, if not a full consensus, a majority opinion on where we think some changes should be made, and then we'll come back with a revised ordinance and approve it all at that point. So, we're just finishing up a discussion on space parking requirements, but I'm gonna, since you weren't here for most of it, unless you want to chime in on what you think we should do for parking spaces. Okay. All right, Tarek, what are you thinking?
I'm fine with keeping as is, but I say we have the single family as it was, same single family in one spot,
So keep the single family in?
but have 2 family and townhouses as is.
Okay. Josh?
Yeah, I think get rid of the single family and then keep that.
And then Katie, I didn't mean to skip over you, sorry about that.
So I'm thinking that we should remove the single family on 1. I think that number 6 should be less than what is on there.
So far, the general consensus is that single family should be taken out of 1, but everything else should stay the same in the new ordinance.
Yes. Okay, so number 1 used to be 1, for single family, it'd be 1 per house, or per unit. So number 1, keep it as the whole ordinance. Number 6 should be less, and there's a couple other ones that I would say probably need to be less as well, just because even though there's special events sometimes that we may have an influx of people visiting, most of the time those parking lots are sitting empty and they're huge and there's only a couple cars in them. And anytime we have impervious surfaces that raises the temperature, definitely in the summer, and it's just not good for the environment. So those are my thoughts. It's more about, what kind of community do we want Painesville to grow into? And in the future, do we want it to look like White Park with all of those great big huge parking lots? And that's my thoughts.
Okay. Well, I'm hearing, we want to strike single family from J1 on page 15. The majority wants to keep everything else the same. Okay. Those are the two things that I wanted to talk about. Bill, you're chair of planning, so I'll turn it over to you for the notes on the rest that you had, if you want.
Yeah, if two took 40, 50 minutes, I'll highlight the ones that really upset me, because I have several.
You're upset?
Yeah, I'm not upset, I have several concerns, so let me start, and I'm just gonna go kind of page by page, and I wanna mostly make note of the differences. And I want people that are gonna vote on this and decide on this to know what they're changing. So allow me to do that, and when it gets to something that's near and dear to my heart, I'll expand, if everybody's okay with that format. So, the first thing that caught my attention actually was on page 2, C at the top, and it is actually in the original, it has not changed, but I really questioned the city's necessity to secure the most appropriate use of land. I feel like ultimately, if someone's going to buy the property and make something out of it, that it bothered me that was there for whatever that's worth. But anyway, 3 and 4 under about 3 inches down there, that's new. Except the most unusual of circumstances, a variance to the ordinance will be denied, and except as specifically otherwise permitted, use, buildings, structures, or premises not conforming to the requirements of this chapter are deemed to be a public nuisance. When you have a chance to vote on this, you would be adding that verbiage, and I don't necessarily know that it's necessary, but it's in there.
So can I talk about those, please?
What page is that?
I'm sorry, page 2.
So number 3, except the most unusual of circumstances, that is something that was added when I met with Jennifer and Bill. And the reason is, right now, the history of the council has been to sort of blanket approve all variances that come in. And
I would witness that.
yep, something comes in, there's some discussion, we find whatever reason it is to approve it, and it goes through. And what's the purpose of having a zoning ordinance if we're not going to stick to the zoning ordinance? Those have come through are reasonable exceptions, the hospital being the most recent one. This ordinance seeks to fit in all of those reasonable things that we've approved in the past. So anything, and not all of them have been reasonable, but we'll say the most. So the purpose in amending the ordinance is to fit in everything that somebody may generally want to do, unless it's really outside the scope of owning property in the city, or really not in conformity with the rest of the developing community. So that's why this language was put in there as a signal to the council and the planning board in the future going, you did this for a reason, stick to it, remember it. We didn't do this lightly. That explains a little bit where that came from.
It does.
And then number 4 is to help the enforcement provision of it.
Okay. Moving on. On page 4, new verbiage added here on animals. And I just, Jennifer, I wanted to make a note in A, the third line under A, there's an extra caged there. And it goes from caged gerbils to caged hamsters.
Probably got rid of that one.
2 cages.
Yeah, no, these class went off, we missed it then.
So that's all new, the entire page of 4, the bottom half of 4 and the top half of 5 is all new. And it all makes pretty good sense. Also on page 5, the bottom 2 paragraphs there are new, the bed and breakfast and the board of adjustments. That all made pretty good sense to me. And this is just my opinion, so don't, on page 6, body piercing to buffer area, that's all new. And then bottom half, bottom third of page 6, starting at business, is new. Businesses, campgrounds, all the way to car washes is new. On page 7, church, place of religious worship is new. Club and lodge is new. Commercial use and comprehensive plan is new. I was always going to look up what environs means, because I didn't know what that means, but I didn't get a chance to. I assume it's a real word, Jennifer, and not a typo. Under comprehensive plan, third line, second word, environs, E-N-V-I-R-O-N.
Yes, it's a word.
Is it? Okay. Well, I went to public school. There you go. And then starting with condominiums, crematorium, all the way down to display outside is all new verbiage added to this policy. On page 8, drive-throughs and driveways added new. Easement has been changed slightly. Fence is new. And a few things have been altered in their positioning. On page 9, funeral homes, that's all new verbiage added. And then the bottom half has been kind of rewritten from home occupation. On page 10, from hospitals to laundromats is all new and added. Livestock was changed slightly. And second from the bottom, lot frontage, the verbiage was changed there slightly, and some verbiage added regarding double and triple frontage. On page 11, the topmost amount, the lot non-conforming, that's new verbiage added. Manufactured homes to medical marijuana dispensaries is all new verbiage added. Down on the bottom, the last 3 paragraphs, from non-conforming to official zoning map is new verbiage. Page 12, off-street loading and open spaces is new. Outside storage is new. Packaging, parking lots is new. Patio is new. Principal structure to public land is new. Public waters was altered slightly. Ramp and recreational vehicles was added. And also added, interestingly, on setbacks, the bottommost amount there, the verbiage building overhang as part of the building was added, which, probably is a good thing. At least everybody understands those things. On page 13, and please interrupt me if somebody wants to comment on these things. I just want to make people aware of what's changed, so interrupt as well.
Bill, I'll just say
It would be really helpful to have, and I know that you had addressed this in the beginning, to have it actually outline the things that were changed, just for comparison.
Bill's doing that for
I agree
us.
with you on that.
So I will just say,
These are all,
for my own edification, I pulled off the zoning ordinance from the city's website and compared it in Adobe to the new version. There were 1,344 changes, 915 replacements, 355 insertions, 74 deletions. When I printed it off, it's 187 pages.
And so you're able to create a redlined copy?
I just did it
I wish I'd have been that smart.
like an hour before the meeting. I ran it, and it is, I find it nearly impossible to review.
Okay, well, I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, no, I get it.
the thing is,
My comment on at least the first part of what we're doing here is we tried unsuccessfully, as you pointed out, because we failed to put in a definition of bluff impact zone, but we tried to take terms that seemed like they weren't just ordinary language terms and put in definitions, because we thought, gosh, we're using these words and, you can argue about what they mean. If we don't say a meaning, it's not very helpful. So we try to include definitions, good or bad, but that's what we're trying to do.
And make no mistake, I'm not being critical, I actually think many of these things are good. But also, to play devil's advocate, if there's not a definition, then it's a gray area and it can be interpreted. But if there's a definition, so with every definition the city creates, it has a little bit more control and power over its residents. That's just the nature of the beast.
Well, actually, I disagree with you. I think the city has less control if we define the terms. I think if it's all gray area, the zoning administrator gets to decide what it means if it's not defined. And so I think in a way we're limiting ourselves a little bit by including all these definitions. I mean, I didn't do that to be mean to our zoning administrator, but I did it because I thought it was good for everybody if we all knew what the terms meant. And we have less gray areas, which puts the city in the position of having to decide. And, you know, I mean, I've talked to Stearns County zoning on stuff over the years, and that's what they do. I mean, if it's not perfectly clear, their zoning administrator decides what it means. And that's really what you have to do.
Interesting take on that, and I can see that angle. I kind of view it somewhat from the other angle where, you know, then there can be two different interpretations and there can be some negotiation process, but if it's clear cut. But I understand exactly what you're saying, so.
But that was our effort anyway.
Okay. And I interrupted Katie, or we interrupted Katie, and I did not, I have a hard time hearing you, Katie, so sorry.
I was just saying that it would be helpful to have what the mayor has as far as what was redlined and what was added. And I think that it would be helpful if we could all go through that together. I realize that we're kind of doing that right now, but it looks like there's an awful lot of things that have been added that we as a group really need to hammer down on. And I know some of you have been through all of this multiple times. I've read through it twice. And I tried pulling out my paperwork and figuring out what was different. So I would really appreciate having what the mayor has so that I can go through and redline it on my own, the things that I have concerns about.
Well, the file is 64 megabytes in size, so if anyone wants to bring me a flash drive, I'll share it with them. But it's 187 pages. I would be loath to ask the city to print it off, because that's 25 cents a page the city has to pay for everything printed, which is a hefty bill for something that we have digitally. But if somebody wants to bring me a flash drive, I can certainly put it on a flash drive for them and hand it over. I just don't know, with as many changes as there are, this is a new ordinance.
It's a new document.
Yeah. I agree that it's important sometimes to see it, but this is where it's at. We're looking at a brand new ordinance as far as I'm concerned.
It's hard to compare.
Again, I'll play devil's advocate and say, though, that this is how people's rights get eroded. It isn't from some giant Supreme Court decision. It's from small town cities approving documents and not necessarily noting the changes that are made. So, and I don't think anybody's malicious here. I'm just stating a fact that that's how this works. So, I would like to stop and comment slightly on page 13, shelter. I'm going to read it in its entirety here. It says, shelter means a nonprofit, charitable, or religious organization providing boarding and or lodging and ancillary, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Services on the premises to primarily indigent, needy, homeless, transient person or persons in transition in need of shelter. I would very much like to have anybody discuss why that needs to say primarily indigent, needy, homeless, transient people. I read it and it seems to me to be kind of more pertinent and less
Yeah, we could go right to person in need of shelter.
I would say, yep, services on the premises to persons or persons in need of shelter. I think anytime the city of Painesville takes some kind of moral position on these sorts of things, I don't see it as relevant, and I think in some ways it can be a negative.
Yep, that's.
I'll just,
So get rid of primarily indigent, needy.
homeless, transient, and then transition, four words later.
Okay,
In my opinion.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, it's, indigent and needy, and those are redundant as is, so.
Yeah, just
Indigent
person.
She's good.
and needy are the same thing anyway. so
Oh,
that's,
okay,
you know.
well, there you go. So then, moving on, short-term rental and storage facilities are new. On the bottom there, swimming pools, tap rooms, and tattooing is new. Temporary pools has been added on top, page 14. Variances been kind of rewritten slightly, but pretty much the same meaning. Zoning administrator and zoning district are added as new. Page 15, A, B, C, D is missing, Jennifer, under floor area. It has been rewritten, but it's primarily the same meaning, but D is missing. Oh, we're back to parking spaces, good God, let's move on. There, we beat that to death. Page 17. Accessory buildings has been rewritten. Two, I want to thank somebody, whoever did that. All garages shall have the vehicle entrance backs upon a public street or alley be set back at least 10 feet. It was 20, so I like that. That's a plus. Okay, here's one of them where I'm going to get on my soapbox. So we're on C number 5. And I would love to know who added, this is a new addition. All accessory structures over 200 square feet must match the color of the primary structure. Sorry, but I see no reason for the city of Painesville to tell people what color their structures have to be.
Is it something that's to do with knowing what belongs to which property in case of an emergency? Because otherwise I would have to agree, I can't see that that is any business
Right.
of the city's.
Yeah.
Do we know what that was born out of? Has that been an issue in the past?
I'm trying to think. It's not been an issue.
Aesthetics?
It is purely aesthetic,
It
yes.
is aesthetics.
Strike it.
I
Was it-
strike
was
it,
it
yeah,
that-
take it out.
Is it the one across from the school? I can't remember.
I think we talked about when Terry built that building.
I think that's more,
what it started, was
that's
that-
more
that
on the
building.
siding materials and the color.
That was what.
It was
came
like
out.
one shade lighter than his house or something.
Yeah, I can see, like I said, if it's not immediately clear where the structure belongs, if there is an emergency, but I would think that would be such a unlikely circumstance as.
That's a stretch.
Well, right,
I
yeah,
like to
mean,
think
yeah.
we're smarter than that.
Right, well, right, and even if you weren't, what's the worst thing that happen? Yeah, I mean, you'd still figure it out. so.
We can't tell people what color to paint their house.
Thank you.
That gets us into
can in some communities.
Yeah, they have problems with that. sort of
We
thing.
don't buy
Something
houses
else.
in communities on purpose, because we don't want to.
It was an interesting fact in touring some cities in the south that you can't change the color. That house, that's the color that house was when it was built 200 years ago, and that's the color it's gonna be.
There are neighborhoods like that in St. Cloud, actually, it's the historic district.
So moving on, page 18, D, E, and F have been added, which makes good sense. Barbecues, garbage cans, motor vehicles, stuff like that. 3, second paragraph under 3, it concerns me somewhat because it's new and it changes the setback. If I am understanding all of the current rules, it changes the setback requirements from a fence from being on property line to a 2-foot setback. And
So right now, as we've been enforcing it, the way I was taught to enforce it is you can't be on the property line. You got to be able to maintain it from all sides. This gave it an actual setback. If you didn't want to abide by the setback, you can go to your neighbor and say, hey, since we both want a fence, let's put it down the property line. We got to have a recordable document, goes with these properties, so any future buyers know that.
And I guess what I'm wondering is, I get the fact that maybe the neighbor would need to sign off on that, but it just seems a little bit cumbersome to have to go to Stearns County and record it. If I sell my house to somebody else and the fences are, for example, my fence is on the property line, I guess I just question the necessity of it, that's all.
Well, I'd like you to delete the whole fence ordinance and not allow, because they are the biggest pains in my rear from April 1st to November 30th.
Interesting, okay.
They are the most controversy, they make or break neighbors, I'd be all for it if you deleted the whole thing and we just say no fences.
Interesting. Well, I don't agree with that, but I appreciate it.
But it is the biggest controversial thing that comes to the front.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's why we have the 2 foot and the.
And what happens is you live next to this great neighbor right now, and your fence is, maybe a couple inches off the property line, or nobody knows where the property lines are. People buy property now, they don't even know what property they're buying.
Yeah.
But then Mr. Grumpy moves in, and you've had this great neighbor there this whole time. Mr. Grumpy moves in, and now you can't even cut the weeds on the other side. You can't even paint it, because Mr. Grumpy has moved in and said, I don't like you, you don't like me, you're not stepping 1 foot on my property.
Okay. I like the fact that at least you allow or are allowing some process to put it on the property. I have to comment on it because it's new. I want to make sure I pointed it out.
And that will also negate, if there's a process to put it on the property line, it'll negate the 4 feet between where weeds can grow and animals can harbor and things can take up residency. That will delete that. Then the 2 neighbors that get along now can put it on the property line, but then that recorded document goes with the properties, so you as a new buyer of either of those properties see that that's on the property line and that fence is pre-existing, it's there. It was agreed upon before you bought it.
Fair enough. Appreciate the input. As Bill Clinton would say, I feel your pain. I'm sorry that you're struggling so much with fences. On number 4, I just also want to talk about, it talks about 80%, and I'm not sure I'm understanding the verbiage here, because it says, the last line, such fences shall not exceed 8 feet in height, and nor be less than 6 feet in height, and shall screen up to 80% per square yard of area. Is that how much you can see through it? My concern, and we run into this because in other areas of this document, it talks about fences. I think about people like the Chups there with the wrecking yard. We would like, and I believe there is a solid steel fence. I'm just wondering if we could. I don't know how that works. I mean, how does, if I wanted to, let's say at my shop, if I wanted to put up a fence, I would put up a solid tin fence, like a whole building, ribbed metal, that would be 100% coverage. And there are examples of that around town. I want to say there's maybe, I just know Mark has a solid steel fence. I'm just trying to think of other spots that might have it, but.
This isn't saying you can't do that, but this is talking about the minimum screening that you have to have between residential and commercial, right?
I just know there's other, yes, I believe so. There's just other spots in the document where it talks about fencing, and I just wanted to, it surprises me that I couldn't put up 100% solid fence.
I think you can, but it's up to 80%.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to reword that.
I think so, it's confusing.
So I think the minimum is 80%.
Okay, I apologize.
I think we need to, no, don't apologize. This is why we're here.
Yeah, no,
We want to make a
okay.
document that's going to work. So I think it can be up to 100%, but the minimum screening, I believe, is 80. To get into that privacy, especially if you're up against manufacturing and then up against residential, or commercial up against residential.
Okay.
But maybe the wording needs to change, so it says screen no less than 80%.
Right.
And up to 100%, yeah.
No, I think just screen no less than 80%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're trying to say, right? Is that it's a minimum of 80%.
So that rolls right into the next page to continue this discussion. On page 19, number 7, approved materials. All fences in all districts shall be constructed of stone, brick, finished wood, chain link, or vinyl. I would like to see also something added there about steel panels, a ribbed steel panel.
So you're You're number 7, correct?
I am on number 7.
Yeah.
I'm not against that. We actually added in the types of materials that you could use
Yes.
to get away from a tire fence. To get away from a pallet fence.
Okay, all right.
To get away from other things that people tend to use as fences that may not.
Yeah, I'd like to see something to rib steel allowed.
And I think that's what Chubb's had,
Yes, it is.
yes. So
Makes
we could
sense.
chain link.
Like if you drive into, there's several, like, that's a fairly common thing, like New London, there's that yard
Oh, yeah,
has solid steel, even when you're going into, towards St. Cloud. Okay, thank you. And then also, so that's all new, from 6 to 9 is all new verbiage added, but that was my only concern. That works. Moving on here as fast as I can, folks. Page 20. I'm concerned about number 3A, smoke. I need to understand how, does that somehow address, or do I need to be concerned if I'm burning wood in my wood stove in my basement and I'm having smoke coming out of my chimney? And I apologize, it may be newer, it may be old, I did not note it in here if it's a new addition. But it says, the emission of smoke by any use shall be in compliance with and regulated by the Minnesota Pollution Control Standard and as subsequently expanded, modified, or amended.
I don't think burning wood in your stove at home would affect the Minnesota pollution.
You know, but I'll play devil's advocate and say the same thing Jennifer said. What about when my crabby neighbor comes to the city and says, my SOB neighbor is burning wood and it's, causing my sinuses to plug up?
So that is primarily, it's a rewrite of what's in there.
Okay,
So,
that could be.
The emission of smoke, so that was in there, it wasn't as defined.
Okay.
So it's better defined in this one. But I don't think, as I read it, and Bill, perhaps you disagree, we're going to fall under the pollution control standard anyway. So,
Yeah.
if something is,
I mean, the whole state falls under the standards of the
Okay.
control, so.
Okay. It concerns me. And again, here, it's, maybe I'm just not understanding the English, but on D, 3D, when it says minimum standards there on the third line, shouldn't that be maximum? All noise shall be muffled so as not to be objectionable due to intermittent beat frequency or shrillness, and as measured at any property line shall not exceed the minimum standards?
Maximum standard, yeah, I see what you mean.
It was minimum,
It is minimum.
yeah, and it was
Yes.
the old one.
Yes, and I just, am I not understanding that? It might just be me.
Maybe it would be simpler if we just said standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just remove it.
Or should comply with the standards, because maybe we should say shall comply with standards established by the Minnesota.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I see what they mean, could mean by either minimum or maximum, so.
Okay. Moving on, H number 3 is new, and I liked it. That allows for temporary handicap ramps, that's a good thing.
and just as a clarifier, something that we discussed, we do not charge for those permits.
Oh, okay.
So, uh-oh.
Well, still get a zoning permit for $30, but the temporary ramp is no fee. But we're up against a lot of elderly in our community that cannot meet the setback of that 20 feet.
Absolutely.
And they may only need that ramp for 30 days, 45 days, whatever it is, and we don't feel that we should be saying, well, you can't go to your home and try to access it. So
That was
we
great.
were actually probably doing it illegally, so we've changed it to be legal.
Good. Beautiful. Page 21, A3 is new. Any subsequent use or occupancy of the land premises shall be conforming use or occupancy. Well, that's a non-conforming use, that makes sense, yeah. Splitting of lots and parcels has gotten moved. That was in the old, it is currently law, but you must be moving it to somewhere else. You refer to chapter 30.
It used to be in 2 places.
Okay.
And we just put it in 1.
Yep. No issues. Moving on here, I think we're good for quite a few pages. On page 30, the very first paragraph is new. This is dealing with signs, yes, and we got a whole mess of stuff on signs, yeah?
Another area that Jennifer could let us just delete.
Well, not so much that, but I wanted to make it more user-friendly for the person that was researching signs.
Yeah.
So we were redundant, and you'll see that. But if you, as a commercial person, wants to build a new business here, you want the commercial zoning ordinance, you want your sign ordinance, that pretty much covers your, the regulations that you want to abide by. Before, you had to look in like 10 different places in the sign ordinance to try to figure out what you could and couldn't have. Now, if you just print the section or read the section under C2, that pretty much identifies what you can and cannot have. So it is very redundant, but it's very similarly laid out as the zones are. It gives you setbacks and square footage and for each zone.
Beautiful. 32, center paragraph. I think that the second line from the bottom, right in the middle, it says his decision. I think that should be an androgynous statement of their decision, or it just seems odd to have his decision there. I'd rather see something non-male, female.
Where did you see?
This is the center paragraph, 8.
Okay.
Second line up from the bottom of that paragraph, right in the middle, his decision.
Right, because it could be a
Okay,
she.
so we'll change it to there.
Signs, yeah. There was some verbiage changing of signs, changed from permitted to allowed, which I won't get into. I won't beat that soapbox. On page 34, 1 through, I, signs in agriculture, 1 through 1, single I, 2 I, 3 I is all new. Signs are it's a tricky subject. On page 35, signs in residential districts, has a kind of a new section. The next page and a half has all been added. I won't beat it to death. There's a new section on page 37 under K. 1 and 2 is all new. And I tried to understand it. It's confusing as hell, but I get it. I understand it, but it's started a little bit with the idea that I can't paint something on my building that's a sign. That I started a little bit with that. I won't waste our time. It's
And in the old ordinance, signs were 1 paragraph.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of our society and the times everything, signs are
Digital
I
and
get it.
everything else, yep.
I get it. Page 38, down on the bottom there, starting with signs in C2 highway, that's all new. And it's probably redundant. Each area, there's kind of some common language that gets repeated. And we're gonna skip a bunch of pages here. I'm up to page 48. On page 48, starting at 2, number 8 there, raising of farm animals and crops is new. Under C, 5 and 6, private swimming pools and tennis courts and outdoor displays has been added. And, yeah, that's that. Maximum lot coverages. I did not realize that was even part of the old verbiage, but it is. I don't like maximum lot coverages at all, even 40 or 50%, but it is what it is. All right, so here I'm going to get up on my soapbox a little bit. Page 49, our single-family residential district intent. A, areas occupied by single-family dwellings designed to promote the development of owner-occupied homes with standards promoting such ownership, community growth, limiting overcrowding. This next line, and otherwise promoting community pride. Sorry, folks. It just, I get it, and it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy, but it just shouldn't be it shouldn't be part of the ordinance of a city.
I do feel that pride in something is subjective, so I agree that is a tough.
And so if it's someone whoever added that wants to comment on why it's there, I'm all ears. But it just seems like anytime the city takes a moral position, it prickles me a little bit.
So, I added it. let me tell you what it was born out of. It was actually, I had a conversation with somebody totally not related to the city in any way, who commented that they used to see a lot more like pride and ownership of the buildings around their town. And that over the last few years, things had really gone downhill. Lawns weren't mowed, things like that. And I didn't purposefully go into it, but when you were talking about where did this pride language come from, it hit my head that I would have that conversation right around the time I was drafting this. So it's probably a subconscious thing that I put in there, so that as we're looking at what are we doing with these zoning ordinances, and then in the future, what are we doing with modifications or variances, things like that. I think we want to look at it from a standard where we want our town to look, and I don't mean to like get on a homeowners association kick, because we are not doing that. But like, what can we do that sort of encourages people to take care of their stuff and not let it become sort of run down and neglected? And can we do that from regulation standpoint, something that makes sense, where we're encouraging it, not mandating it? That, I'm okay with getting rid of it. I hear it.
And I appreciate your explanation. I just question number one, I don't like it because it puts the city council in a moral position, which they shouldn't be. But I also question, even if we left it there, I don't think it changes diddly.
So how do you feel about prayer before council meetings, Bill? No.
We should talk sometime.
Okay, we'll have a beer talk about it sometime.
I agree, it's not something that really should be in a zoning ordinance. We have a nuisance ordinance that.
If we would enforce our existing ordinances, most of this nuisance and things would be addressed, from mowing your lawn to painting a house that.
And we can have those.
And I would say, if you wanted to think about putting it somewhere, I think the place where we have the general intent and purpose of zoning, I don't know, Bill wouldn't like it there either, but rather than putting it into one of the zoning groups, if you were gonna talk about, trying to promote community pride and that kind of thing, I think it would maybe go better in the general intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance than it would to stick it into one particular type of the zoning.
If the city wanted to create some mission statement and be all happy and sing kumbaya, fine, but the reality is this is law, and I think we need to really respect, it needs to be very generic and not, it needs to be respectful for everybody that is willing to buy a property in Painesville and pay the taxes on it. So I'd like to see it stricken.
I agree, because one of the main houses, or one of the houses in town that we hear a lot of complaints about, that person takes a lot of pride in their property. It just looks different than other people would like to see. And I agree that I don't feel that that's something that we need to, beyond our, already in place nuisance organization or regulations that we should be trying to regulate.
Sure, can we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a 5-minute recess.
2 hours of
Hour and a half, come
I think that's
on.
one of those things that probably sounded good when I drafted it, but now that you look at it 3 months later.
I'm just so you know, about 4 pages from now, it gets even worse, so.
Let's stretch it out.
I'm trying not to get on a soapbox, but I spent 10 or 12 hours doing it, I feel like I need to share something.
Because it's good to,
Kind of no overchange.
that's right.
I'm sorry I missed your, before, I had to wait until, did you have this before?
Yeah.
I had to wait for Bill to get back to the liquor store first.
Bill's here.
I could come, how did that go?
They adjusted it on the 31-3.
Wait, you don't know.
They really do it.
Is it? Yeah, I would say it's none of my business, you know.
Non-denominational or a recovery church, they have some in Wilmington, they have them. They did. That sort of thing, bake sales and drum sales.
Yeah, that's good.
I remember, not that it was Jack.
We're all in agreement, go ahead, that's what you said.
I would really enjoy it.
This is one.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we've done all
Create the apartments and then the church has a story.
I'll make a note.
They approached me and said, we want to run the whole thing. I'm like,
Awesome.
I go speak to them. That's all.
You get some stuff out of there.
It's
Just come back here.
It's in there. It's not authorized. It's just.
Am I authorized?
I mean, you have to line this there, you don't wanna go there.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
But if they get the word out that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think people, I mean, baked goods, fresh baked goods is something we don't have anymore, so.
I know,
I mean-
I know, it kills me. I had looked at, not the chapel, but the sunken in part behind it, you know, for a daycare a long time ago, and it was actually, it would have been a really nice space for it, given like the outside area and everything, but it just, with all the repairs needed, it wasn't feasible, but, yeah, it'll be nice to see something in there.
Did anybody hear anything about the old, whatever, the old department store, is that? And somebody said that stopped, and then somebody said there was workmen there, and I was just curious if anything's
It's all,
happening.
there have
It's
been,
supposed to be back on.
there have been issues with his, you know, like some grants and things like that.
Yeah, Tarek was gonna call him and see where he was at. I said, yeah, I said, I thought it was stopped, and then somebody said, oh, there's a lot of trucks there and stuff, so.
So is,
He's got a big dumpster there now.
oh,
Yeah.
They did some kind of insulation last week. It was
Yeah,
all over
so apparently,
I
the,
have a question for you.
between the
Are
Legion
we still
and him,
on
that
the-
they did kind of pick it up.
No, I.
oh. Yep, I knew it.
Or is that? No matter how far.
Well, Paul knew what to do by skipping our meeting tonight.
I would say, huh?
Yeah.
I think so.
My kids are home yet.
Where is he?
I don't know.
Oh,
I have no idea.
nobody called him?
No, I didn't.
It's good Painesville water there.
Glad somebody drinks it.
I like it. I like our water.
It's pretty good water.
I go to St. Cloud and I can taste the
Oh,
Mississippi River.
yeah, that's not good there.
That's gross.
Yeah.
What time was the training tonight?
6.
Oh, you're late.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make it.
You're not making it.
You're not making, we can stop anytime and redo this. I don't necessarily say.
We're here, let's hammer it out.
All right, I'm up to page 50. I've skipped a few.
That's halfway.
That is over half.
I got a sneaky feeling you've got the most to say today, Bill.
Shocking, isn't it? I'm so sorry.
Don't be. I enjoy it. I do. You're best.
That's why you're the chairman.
I just know how these things go. It's called erosion.
Yep.
No wonder Andy's not answering me. He must be at training.
What's that?
Oh, I was just texting to see if they were home yet. But he was going straight to the fire. Just hope somebody picked up the dog.
You had the dog.
I've had the dog for 4 days. Now, I love the dog, but running up and down those stairs gets a bit much.
We all have thoughts sometimes.
That's why I don't have one.
Oh, yes.
Well, at least you have green, you have a little green space in back.
I do. That's covered with snow though.
I got some rentals there and they're like, can I have a dog? I'm like, no, because there's no place for the dog to crap. You can have a cat.
Yeah.
A cat can crap
Yeah,
indoors.
I have cats in my building too, but no big dogs, little dog. My mom had her little dog, you know.
I like big dog. I'm a big dog kind of guy, so
I don't have enough grass. For
yeah. You should see our yard. It's just a bomb shelter. It's pretty bad. I'm waiting for a good thunderstorm to kind of knock them all down. Entire winter's worth.
All right.
Jennifer's back, I'll call us back to order.
Okay. We maybe have to get her.
She's sending the rest.
It doesn't tell him that I don't need one, and that's gonna be. Let's see.
Well, at least it's still light out.
Ain't that the truth? This has been kind of a crappy spring though. I mean, and I look at the 10-day, even, it's supposed to be like 67 on Saturday, but rain. And then it's back to like 30s and 40s next week.
That's like.
All right.
All right.
So we're back. We talked about getting rid of the "and otherwise promotes community pride" in 3641. And Bill, back to you.
So the next question I had, actually Brad, I hope when you can give me some feedback or information on this. When we talk about, so I'm on page 50, and we're talking about building dimensions, and we're calling out that the building needs to be at least 24 feet wide and 24 feet long. But when I do that math, it ends up being 576 square feet. So, but yet we say that it has to be at least 800 square feet. Is there a reason I couldn't build a 24 by 24 house?
As far as the buildings code is considered, I think 800 square feet is the minimum.
And that's a state thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that answers that question. All right, thank you. Moving down here to the bottom of page 50, same complaint with Mr. Sean's warm and fuzzy stuff here on intent. Sorry, Sean, when it says accessible to all individuals of varying socioeconomic backgrounds, and I don't like otherwise promotes community pride. For all the same reasons, but the socioeconomic backgrounds is kind of like, and I'm giving you the opportunity, explain to me why that would even be there, because I don't get it.
As a reminder to everyone who looks at this, that we're not zoning only for those who can afford to build $300,000 plus homes. That we need to have zoning ordinances that reflect people come from all different backgrounds. So some people might be able to buy over in the new Heatherwood lots and build a really nice house, but we also need to have some other lots that are built for people who have a $50,000, $60,000 a year income. For people who might not have a trust fund that they can draw off of. Just as a reminder that we are looking out for more than sort of the upper echelon.
And I can respect that, and I hear exactly what you're saying. I personally don't think it belongs in an intent for a single and two family, or any, sorry, I don't feel like it really belongs in any type of intent for an ordinance in our city. I understand what you're trying to say, and I'm not arguing that it's a bad thing. It puts the Painesville City government in a moral position, and I just don't think anything good can ever really come of that. I'm sorry. So that's just my opinion.
I'll give you the moral position with the community pride, but I can't agree on the varying socioeconomic backgrounds. I think that's just it's not saying build it, it's not saying build a low-income building. It's just saying keep these things in mind. And I think that's what the intent statements are for. What are we doing this? What's the purpose of this?
I feel like if we do it right, the ordinances that we pass should reflect that as is. So I don't.
All of us at this table can do it right. But what happens in 20 years?
Sorry, but the city's been here for, I don't know, how long, 100 years. And I really struggle with, and with all due respect to your position as mayor, I don't like that you're able to put that stamp on this document going forward. I just don't, and I'm just being respectful.
Yeah.
I just feel like it puts the city in a moral position that it shouldn't be in. It should be very neutral, very straightforward, and I just don't, personally, I don't like it. So I'll just state that and move on.
Well, what's the moral about it?
It really is saying nothing important. Accessible to all individuals with varying social economic backgrounds. You know what that means? That means everybody. That's all you're saying. So you could just as well say accessible to everybody. And if we put that in there, people would be like, why the heck is that even in there? So I just don't, it doesn't say anything. It just says everybody.
Is there something that we do that makes you think that we're not being open to everybody?
Not that we're doing. No. Again, this is me trying to look out. Look long-term.
Could we take a consensus on it?
Fine with that? Yeah. I'm not here as authoritarian dictator. This is, yep.
And I'm not either, I'm just stating my opinion, but I'd love to, if we're gonna make a consensus, it would be good to have it now. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
I don't mean to put people on the spot, but if you're someone's willing to yay or nay this, because obviously we have the opposite position.
Anyone willing to speak up first? Otherwise, I'll start down at the end with Neil again.
We definitely want to remove the community pride. And I'm looking at how you would reword it. Still be accessibility to all individual.
Yeah, that would work.
Individual with, and limiting overcrowding.
I just question what we're saying. We're saying what seems to be rather obvious is that it's open to everybody.
Not everybody looks at things that way, though. And this is acknowledging that we have a system that's built on a history of not being open to everybody.
I disagree. I think anybody can go buy a piece of property in this town. I've never witnessed somebody not selling a piece of property to somebody else or somehow addressing zoning based on some imaginary bias or, maybe we should just move on. I don't think we need to, I just needed to comment on it.
No, and I think it's important because it is guiding. It's not something that I wanted to make a unilateral decision on.
Okay.
So I think let's have the conversation. It's here.
My turn?
Sure, you look like you had something to say.
I agree with John's point that I also feel that it hasn't always been the case that it has been accessible. No, I'm not speaking in any particular spot in Painesville or even, I'm just talking about as a whole, the country even. But I do feel that when we're elected to represent the interests of the particular people who elected us, and obviously we need to safeguard certain things like the river and environmental factors and things like that, but I don't feel beyond that it is necessarily our place to, put things down looking forward 20 years if it's something that, because the future people who will be electing leaders at that time are going to elect those leaders to represent the interests of themselves then. So I don't know that we can, if it's something like this that isn't safeguarding a physical thing or the growth of the town, I guess I see Bill's point that it's not necessarily our place to say that.
Okay. And Neil, I kind of heard the same thing from you, but I just wanted to...
Fairly neutral.
Yeah, just, I'd like it rephrased somehow.
If I'm fairly neutral, because it's something I hold in my head to do when I'm looking at these ordinances, certainly. But I guess if I had to really come down on Bill's side, that it's not necessarily our place in that respect to look forward 20 years.
Okay, Gene?
I think that we could just stop the paragraph after promoting community growth and accessibility to all individuals, and just period it there.
Okay. All right. Oh, sorry. I agree with you. With me? With Gene. Okay.
I'm with Gene.
Okay.
Simple. Yeah, I think I did with after.
Okay. Katie? Katie still with us?
I can unmute it here, yes. So I think that I agree with the mayor. Reason being, if we don't specify people who are disadvantaged or that have different abilities, different life things. Sorry, I took a bunch of Dayquil and I'm really sick. But I think that we need to acknowledge that looking forward, in 20 years or 50 or even longer.
Well, I hear the general consensus is to basically end it with all individuals, but in the other ones, we do have limiting well, not the other ones, but in the R single family, we do also include limit overcrowding. And I think if we're going to get rid of the socioeconomic, we should keep the
Yes.
overcrowding. Yeah.
I agree.
And I think that I agree with the reasonably priced as well, because
That's in the beginning part already.
yes.
Yeah,
So I-
So,
Yeah.
I think that kind of covers it.
I agree with eliminating overcrowding.
So then for any of those intent statements where those phrases are found, they'll just be eliminated.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
On page 51, number 5 at the top, it was added, in-home daycares. I have some questions about why people can't build accessory buildings on property, but I won't beat that drum tonight. I just, I don't see the logic in it that, you know, in a highway commercial, you can build a storage building, but on a different lot in town you can't. But that's probably an argument for another night. On page 52, I believe it is a conditional use to bring in a to bring in a used dwelling. And it's not new, I don't think, but I'm just wondering why that is. Why, if I buy a piece of property, why don't I have the automatic right to move a house in versus building new?
Where are you?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 52, number 6.
Number 6.
I'm just wondering why that is a conditional use versus just an allowed use. Why can't I move in a used house versus building a new house? I'm assuming the building would still have to meet all of the same square footage, 800 square feet, no taller than 35 feet. I'm just wondering why that is. You know, we want to be, talking about socioeconomic and making it affordable to all, and I would question it. There are certainly advantages, financial, to moving in a used building from our used building sellers here close to town. And I guess where that question goes next is, you know, if it was a conditional use, what would the questions be that you'd ask? You know, is that why that is, so that you could ask about? I don't understand it, I guess, sorry.
Well, so right now, they are not getting the conditional uses. I've never even enforced that.
Okay.
Right now, they are pre-inspected.
Pre-inspected?
They're pre-inspected.
Okay.
They actually have to schedule an appointment with Brad. We make sure that they meet code.
Yes.
If there's anything that they need to bring up to code, that is identified on their building permit.
Okay.
So currently, we have brought in not only the one on Minnesota Street, but there's also one out on Milglow. Both of those did not get conditional uses.
Okay. I mean, I love the idea of
Pre-inspection.
somebody bringing in a used building. I think it's great. It's very resourceful.
So we should take it out.
Well, but I'm wondering if we take it out of there, is there a way we can put in so that is that pre-inspection process already codified somewhere else?
Or is that what's following? Is that what makes it happen? Is this here phrase? I see what you're saying.
I don't know where that's written that we do that for sure. It's normally you want to move it in, and if you move it in and I tell you gotta do $10,000 more work than you think you need to do, I should probably look at it first. That's where that pre-inspection comes in.
And I have no issue with the pre-inspection because that allows it for you to make sure it's 800 square feet and it's not over 35 feet tall. I get that. I just, given the cost and paperwork and of a conditional use, I mean, I see that when we have our meetings. It just seems, I question the cost versus benefit, and yeah.
Is that something that we could move up to number 6 as a permitted use, but add the language so that it would say used dwellings or manufactured homes over 10 years old, provided they pass an inspection with the building inspector? Is that feasible?
So back on page 51, under C, added between 1 and 5.
Under B.
Under B.
Okay, excuse me, okay, yep.
Yep, added as a number 6.
That would work.
That would, then you could still catch it and do your inspections.
Because that's what we want.
I hate to even bring up the term, but is there something that, and I blocked out most of what we decided about it, but is there something that separates the used dwelling and manufactured home from a mobile home?
Yes.
Yes, I took, sorry, I took used dwelling as a used, as a
Right,
stick-built
like you did
frame
for like
house.
Anderson.
Yeah, I guess I just think of the ones, you know, that sit outside 23 and that get moved in.
Because manufactured homes, that's where my
Okay.
question is
So-
coming. Just because I know that many lots have restrictions on the age of those based on flammability and other issues.
Yeah, I guess, so number 6, I'm particularly discussing the used dwellings. The manufactured homes over 10 years old, I didn't really see much of an issue with, because I know that becomes a sore point for a lot of neighbors. I was more concerned about the used house, or,
I don't have a problem bringing in, I don't think, Brad, to you, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't have a problem bringing in the used dwelling as long as it's pre-inspected. The manufacturers that have all come in have been new, the ones that are built through, like, formerly Cerullo Beach, on Willow. But we might want to, as we're talking about this, think about how we want those verbiage to change when we get to the mobile home park, bringing in mobile homes and those years of age.
well, it helped me understand, but isn't this specific to what zone are we in?
Yes,
R1?
yeah, this is
R1,
yeah.
so, yeah. All right, speaking specific to this zone.
So, and I thought that there was a separate definition for a mobile home, but I'm not seeing one.
No, there's not.
Manufactured.
They're referred to as manufactured homes now.
So,
But didn't, again, I don't mean to stir this pot, but isn't there something about the district where they are allowed, or was that not, did we not ever do that?
I think you can move a mobile home into.
Yeah, so the way they're sort of addressed in a backhanded way is by the square footage requirements that Bill was talking about, because it's hard to have a traditional, what we would call a mobile home, that's going to meet the square footage requirements for a residential zoning district. So sort of by definition, they're limited to manufactured home parks, unless you have a manufactured home more of the type that you would buy, you know, up at the Hilltop Stop or whatever, you know. I mean, and you know, but some of those are basically double wides. The double wides keep getting taller, so they're fancier and fancier, but they're basically true of what we used to call a mobile home with a pitched roof on it, and now the roofs are getting more complicated on those, just like they are in houses, you know. But yeah, so essentially you could have a large, long, double wide and meet the square footage requirements.
I'll just leave it at that. You guys can figure out you know, it sounds like we're all on the same page. It's just a matter of how that fits in and how you guys, I have zero issues with the pre-inspection. I just would, I'd love it to be easier for someone to buy a used house and move it into the city. I see the conditional use permit is excessive. I'll just leave it at that.
I think it makes sense making a permitted use.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Because that's how we're doing it. That's how we're doing it.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's just make the inspection process.
So I'm just to reiterate then, on page 51, we're going to make it number 6, used dwellings or manufactured homes over 10 years old with a building inspection.
With a pre-moved building inspection.
Yes, with a pre-moved building inspection.
I lost my place.
And that's
We're on page 52.
Thank you.
I think we can move on.
All right, let's move on. Excellent. So on that same area there, 7 and 8 are added, commercial daycare centers and planned unit developments for R1. Adjacent primary structures down at the bottom there, number 2, the 15 feet was 20. I don't know what caused that to change, but it did change slightly. On page 53, H is new, to be connected to city utilities when available. That makes good sense. I actually thought, I was surprised that wasn't in there originally. Under R2, multiple family residential districts, same argument, sorry Sean, socioeconomic background promotes community pride. I have no issues with our other verbiage. Maybe we could make that verbiage kind of a standard.
Well, I thought that's what.
That's what he said.
Okay, fair enough. Number 6 was added there, in-home daycares. Number I got it, boy. Can't even read my own notes here. Boarding and rental, 2 persons. I don't know what I meant by that. Moving on. Page 54, no permitted accessory use. Number 4, commercial daycare centers was added. And on that, we've discussed the 15 and 20 was changed again on page 55. Adjacent primary structures went from 15 feet to 20 feet. On the page, did I screw that up?
Yeah, like 15 feet.
20 to 15.
I apologize. Thank you, Tar. I'm trying to zip through this. I appreciate everybody's patience. Our manufactured home districts, same argument with intent there. It sounds like we're all in agreement to create a more universal verbiage and carry that through. I'm good with that. I do have a question here on page 57, number 6, under H. Paved private streets serving the manufactured home park shall not be less than 28 feet wide for parking on one side of the street. I'm going to come back to that and touch on that a little bit later. There's some other areas, I think, where it talks about planned unit development where we're not requiring, where we're only requiring 20-foot wide streets, and I question why that is. Why in a trailer court does it need to be 28 feet? So I'll circle back to that, just kind of note that in trailer courts or mobile home parks, we are requiring 28-foot wide streets. And a couple pages here, we're skipping along. 59 is good.
On one side and a mobile home park, right?
Page 60, a couple things were added here. G and H at the top, pretty straightforward stuff, hooked up to utilities and compliance with building structures. Okay, so we are on, this is C Central Downtown District, near and dear to my own heart, sorry.
Okay, I have one question, if I can interject.
Please.
Did we have any issue with the intent on 58?
I think I touched on it, sorry, we just all kind of went like, yep, we're gonna have some common verbiage there.
Oh, okay, 'cause this is worded differently than what you've been,
Oh, sorry.
than what you've been looking at.
I have no notes, so let me just read it real quick.
Okay.
It is the intent of this district to provide for the development of low-density multifamily dwellings in units consisting of no more than 5 units per structure and 1 unit per lot, to provide for reasonable standards for such development, to avoid overcrowding and to prohibit the use of land which would be incompatible with or detrimental to the essential character of the district. Seems good to me.
Okay, that's perfect.
I like that.
I just wanted to make sure we're.
I appreciate that, Jennifer. It has no moral opposition, and I like that, sorry. Go there, 61. Just a couple new things I want to touch on here. 22 and 23 are new, brew houses and brew pubs, cabinet shops, we all know about that. Cider houses, 31 is new, exterminator is new. And then I have a question on 45. This is again one of those situations where maybe I'm just not understanding the English language, but it says food locker or meat markets, including sales and home delivery, cutting, processing, and packaging of meats and game, but not including slaughtering and eviscerating activities. Lockers shall be provided for individual home rental and storage only. And then it says, all animals brought in for slaughter shall be slaughtered or eviscerated the same day of arrival.
Yeah.
Am
It's like
I?
saying you can't do it there, but you have to do it the same day.
Yes, thank you. I was hoping it wasn't just me being
No, that's what
stupid.
it says.
So somebody needs to clarify that. I really don't have a position on it, I just would like it to be understandable.
I guess.
Well, we have a meat market that does slaughter. and stuff.
Slaughter, right.
Okay, we meant to allow for it because.
Yeah, I think we can take out the but
But not.
to, but to activities.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Page 62, liquor stores, 63. I'll just throw this out there, that I would say within the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be legal marijuana in Minnesota. And given that this is, and maybe you just can't get ahead of that curve, but at some point, somebody's going to need to address where that can be sold. Just saying. Maybe we have to wait until it becomes law, but yeah, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, then we can add it as an
On page 63, wineries was added. So on the bottom of page 63, and this is actually a common question that I have, but especially in C1, I wonder on number 2 there, the bottom paragraph, why are we limiting building height to 45 feet? I mean, if someone wanted to come in and spend $8 million and build a 6 or 7 story building, would we tell them no? I just question it, again, it's one of those things we talk about, variances, and then as soon as, Quick Trip comes in and wants to put a taller sign up, or, I'm just wondering, is there a logical reason to limit it at 45?
Well, it's been that since the beginning of time, not saying that
That's a
is
good
correct.
reason. That's a good reason.
We also have to be cognizant of the fly zone, which, every time they do a height, they go over the restricted area to run and make sure that they're gonna not impose on that.
Okay.
But that might not be even a valid thing in the C1 district. But otherwise, that's just what it's been.
And, okay.
I think the other thing I think we've talked about in the past is fire safety, but I don't know about the fire department, if they have concerns about buildings taller or not, really, but,
I don't think we got a lot of this 45 feet long.
You don't?
No.
But as soon as you build that height, doesn't the building requirement, at some point, doesn't the building code kick in and you have to have sprinklers and elevators and fire escape?
Sprinkler systems don't seem to prevent all fires.
No.
But I mean, there are so many buildings that are taller than the tallest ladder trucks in the world, so.
Yeah, no,
Can't really-
It would just be fine.
I downtown, buildings are connected to each other. I mean, it's a little bit different concern where you have a standalone high-rise in a city, although, not that a fire there is good, we've seen the result of that can be catastrophic, but.
It was just a thought,
To make it
No,
more-
I don't know that it's the right height.
I don't either. I just
Not
question
what
whether.
the new number would be.
I question why we even put a number there. Why, I would just say, why are we even calling out a limit? I can see in a residential, it's 35 feet, that's a little bit different, but in it's there, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not, but I think in industrial and light industrial, I think there's also some height limitations, and I just kind of go, why? Well, because, as soon as someone walked in here and wanted to spend $2 million, we'd be like, hell yeah. Make it 80.
Give you that variance real fast, wouldn't we?
So I just throwing that out there, folks. So moving on here, page 64. Okay, so we did have storage facilities, and I touched on that earlier too, that I questioned why,
Can I rebuttal, or maybe just tell you a little bit why that is? If we were to allow storage sheds on residential lots without a dwelling, there wouldn't be any residential lots left. They'd all be storage sheds. And there was at a point in our council that determined, and our planning commission a few years back, that said, that's not what we want to see our city to be, it's just one storage shed after another. And it actually was, I think, after Wooglow started. That was
After what?
After we developed Wooglow is actually when I think
Okay.
that became, pertinent. So now you actually have to build a dwelling first before your storage shed, or if you want a storage shed and a dwelling on 2 different lots, they got to combine the lots.
Okay. So the only place you can build a storage shed now is is highway.
C2, you can have them in, also in industrial.
Okay, industrial, yeah.
Yeah, so we have like Henches are up there, storage sheds, we have D&D up at there, storage sheds, we have, D&D over here by John Deere.
Okay.
I'm gonna get back up on the soapbox battle that I lost 2 years ago and say it should only be industrial. And I don't want storage units.
Yeah, see, you didn't like the highway ones, I remember that discussion.
Yeah, so I lost it and that, I'm not expecting.
You're wrong, it's okay, you're wrong.
Well, I'll tell you now, the township now is requiring
Yes.
houses and not just storage sheds on their properties. So it's just better.
Well, I know for a fact, everybody that is building storage shed facilities are building more because of the area that we live in. We're our own worst enemy, and I've said this over and over and over. We are advertising trails and boats and water and bikes, and so every lot or lot owner or property owner needs a boat and a camper and an ATV and a snowmobile and a bike and a kayak and a canoe. Well, we have 50-foot lots. You buy them, you have no idea what you're going to do in 10 years. Nobody can build a shed on, a big enough shed, and I know these lots that would be there would all be storage sheds, because you can get a lot fairly cheap, now let's put a big storage shed.
Yeah, and I struggle because ultimately, at the very core of me says, if I'm willing to pay for that lot and pay the taxes on it and build a building that Brad approves, I should be able to. But I understand both sides. I won't beat it to death. I just wanted to touch on it. Okay, Brad, okay, John, this is the worst one yet. Page 65. A light industrial district, and encourages the development of new green industries. Sorry, that just, yeah, that's, you want to talk about a moral position? That's it. You know, what does that say to non-green industries with that, you know, that we want to shoo them out of our, no, I hate it. I won't beat it to death, but you have the floor. Please make your point.
My point is, looking at all of the industrials, we wouldn't want, I say we, knowing that you would say it's the property owner's position.
I probably would.
But we don't want a tire burning facility in our community. We don't want that pollution in our, I don't.
If it meets MPCA smoke requirements, isn't that why we pay taxes to have an MPCA?
I don't want a nuclear waste disposal in my facility. I don't want things like that. And we should be encouraging new businesses, new
businesses, I agree.
Yeah. And that means not just opening up a business that's been around for 100 years. It means looking at what businesses are going to be in 50 years. What kind of manufacturing are we going to have? If there are issues, I know with solar panel manufacturing, as far as disposal and things like that go, but why can't we be encouraging of solar panel, wind turbine manufacturing in town instead of always looking at what has it been for the last 200 years and making sure that we can have an anvil shop? Why can't we look at 2150 instead of 1850?
And all I can say is, it is not the city's position to encourage any kind of industry. We are here to run the city, to make sure that the toilets flush and water comes out the faucets, to have an orderly community, that someone doesn't build a rendering plant next to the elementary school. But to have this written in our law that says, and encourages the development of new green industries, sorry,
So, Bill, what you would like to say is just encourages the development of new industries?
absolutely. We love to develop new industries. I just have a real problem with somehow being specific to one over another, because as a city, as a tax base, we should not be differentiating. If it meets all the other criteria, if a tire burning facility meets the MPCA requirements for smokestack emissions, it is not the position of us to poo-poo it because it's not green. That's my opinion.
It should be our position to protect the community and the people that live within the community.
Absolutely.
And not just those who live here now, but those who are going to be living here after we pass on.
100%.
And if we don't leave a viable world for them to live in, then what are we doing?
What are we doing? We're running a city.
How's it all so far?
Not great.
Not very good, is it?
No, so let's do something about it.
Until the rest of the world comes to our line of thinking, you might as well hit your head on the wall. And I'm not saying that green isn't the future, but the whole world needs to get on board.
Yep. And it's
Right
got
now,
to
we're
start somewhere.
breaking the country trying to be green.
I struggle with the position, the moral position that this puts on the city, because we are here to represent all of the members of this community, and that means we need to be very neutral, very non-biased in our position. You know, not everyone is going to drive a Prius, but you know what? I still pay taxes here. I still expect you to represent me because you're the mayor of the city. And these types of statements are very non-inclusive. You know, you want to talk about inclusivity and bringing everybody to the table. These types of statements in our law, in our city of 2,400 people, that is non-inclusive. And it divides and separates people. And it serves no purpose. you know, I could maybe get on board if this somehow served a purpose. This is lip service that does nothing to change the laws that a company or a business has to abide by. And I don't want to beat it to death, and I don't want to make enemies. I really struggle with that's in our law. Somehow we are going to encourage one type of business over another is not the position that a city of 2,400 people should be taking. I'll move on. We don't even need
Well, we
to
need consensus.
Yeah, we should.
To change this.
Neil, I think you want that on.
Yeah,
All right.
I think any and all industry, especially like Bill said, if it meets current pollution standards, bring them on.
Okay, Megan?
We're open for business.
Again, it's, you know, I think basically, you know, and if you look up what a city councilor's role is, you know, to protect the public and to advocate for the district. And I do feel like, you know, we need to make choices that protect the environment, protect the town for the citizens we have now and the citizens in the future, because that is something you can't get back. But I feel kind of the same as I did on the other one, that I think that if we have that in mind when we're making our ordinances, then it doesn't necessarily need to be stated in this explicit way, because our ordinances should do that on their own.
Okay. Gene?
Well, I hate to see us limit things by saying it needs to be a green. It doesn't say it needs to be. It says we should encourage it. And I agree with that we should encourage people to be green in their businesses. And I do know that we're looking at becoming a green city, so that's part of our plan. And I've always thought we should do that. So, is this the place for it? I'm not sure this is the right spot for it.
Okay.
That's my only.
Okay. Randy?
I agree with her that maybe in some other place it would be perfect. I don't know about this place.
Okay. Tarek?
I think it says what you want to say without the word green.
Okay.
Because if you read it, it says here, about commercial activities that generate little to no noise or air pollution and encourage the development of new industry. So it kind of already says it without needing the word green in it.
I think that's a smart idea.
Katie?
So I think we just remove the word green, and I think that the rest of the statement would be correct as our intent.
Okay. Josh?
Yep, I think move the green.
All right, so take it out of there, and then it's going to be in the next one as well, so probably take that out.
Thank you. Moving on. 66, a couple new things there under D, 1B, electrical generation facilities, and D, planned unit developments, and E, transportation and freight are all now conditional uses, where before they were, I don't know, something else other than a conditional use. And moving on.
I think they weren't permitted at all.
Okay.
I mean,
They're brand new things.
Okay, thank you. 67, lot coverage,
Now, this intent, that's not to interrupt, but this intent is a little different than the last. So are we good with that intent?
it is the intent of this district to provide for the establishment of heavy industrial and manufacturing development and uses, which because of the nature of the product, isolation from residential or commercial uses is desirable. I think it's absolutely perfect. Nice and generic. So some stuff got moved around in here. I struggled with trying to make sense of it all, but I didn't see anything that seemed inappropriate or not, shouldn't have been there. On page 68, the definitions, some things were added there where the shoreland, 1,000 feet from normal high water mark and 300 feet from river or stream was added, that verbiage. And also added was D on the bottom, shoreland district boundaries. As we talked about very early in the meeting on page 69, that bluff impact zone was added.
And are we good, is everyone good with just adopting the DNR definitions for the bluff impact zone?
Yeah, because that's what we use above anyway with the 1,300
Yeah,
feet.
so we'll have to put in a definition for bluff and then the bluff
Yeah.
impact zone. Okay.
I think they're good there. 71. Okay, I didn't understand what this meant. On page 71, number 4, total vegetative removal shall not exceed soft or half the lot width, whatever is less.
Okay, I was making notes in the last one, I was trying to start taking minutes as a second.
I'm sorry, I can slow
What
down.
page are
It's
you
not-
on?
I'm on page 71,
Okay.
number 4. It says total vegetative removal shall not exceed soft or half the lot width, whichever is less. I think it's a typo, I just don't know what's supposed to be there.
Okay.
And that's under shoreline, the shoreline.
It is on page 71, second paragraph, number 4.
Number 4.
You can just figure it out. I'm sure it's just a typo, Jennifer. I don't know. I don't think there's much controversy. I just don't know what it means.
Just,
That's what it should have been.
Trying to see what it was in the old, or the current one.
Yeah, I didn't think to do that. But by page 71, I was pretty tired of flipping back and forth.
We put a lot of time in this.
I'll just move on, Jennifer. I'm sure you can make sense of it. I don't know what it was supposed to say, but I doubt it should say soft. I'll just leave it at that. Moving on. That'll make sense. I think we're just about to the end here. Oh, wait, so here we go. So on page 79, under roadways in planned unit development, I'm wondering on page 79, E2, why in a planned unit development they get away with 20-foot roads, but in a trailer court they need 28.
It's because we made them have parking on one side of the street in the trailer park, and we're not dealing with street parking in a planned unit development theoretically, so that was the reason. I don't know if it makes sense, but that was the reason.
Okay.
Because we had parking.
At least there's a reason for it, okay.
Does it make a difference too that they're moving possibly larger, mobile homes in and out? They need the extra space as
Well,
well?
that's a good reason. That's good logic. Wider streets. That makes good sense.
Planned unit development, they wouldn't be parking on
Yeah,
the streets anyway.
But they wouldn't be moving.
the other thing in a mobile park too is there's no sidewalks usually, so that's also your pedestrian traffic is on those same streets.
All good reasons, thank you. Now this also is a little bit dear to my heart, this page 85. Page 85 under B, 1, 2, and then I through V. I know Jennifer, we've talked about this multiple times. This is that kind of that worksheet verbiage. It sucks.
I get it. In the real life world of variances, there's a check sheet. There's actually a check sheet that a planning board and a council are supposed to utilize. And that's that worksheet or those answers that you have to answer.
Yep.
And if one of those is a negative or a no, the variance should be denied.
So why do we do this? Why do we lock ourselves into this? I mean, is it like a state law? Can we not change that?
Yeah, it's like a state law.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a good reason.
That's why we're so adamant about Bill at if you come to the council meetings or see it, every variance to Bill's defense says, well, this really shouldn't be approved according to the law. This does not meet all the standards. You should be denying it. And the council says, approved.
Okay.
So by right, all the training that you go to or you've attended, if it doesn't check yes on all the boxes, you should be saying no.
So then, by that argument, we should be much less strict. I don't know. I don't know how to you know, when people come here, they make a valid argument, and, you know, it's just really hard to go through this worksheet and honestly yay or nay it because of the way it's worded. We do it, and we get it done, and everybody knows that, but, and I did not know it was a state law, so thank you for that.
Well, it's partially a mixing of the state statute and the way the Minnesota Supreme Court has interpreted it. And it's changed, you know, it's changed a little bit over the years, but this is where we are right now.
Okay.
Variances, they can be approved. And when you look at a unique lot, and I'll use one of the last variances we approved, and I believe, you know, in my heart and in my mind, that one was approved and it should have been approved, and that was the hobby variance. Reason is they are double fronted, and that was a unique situation there. But the other variances that you've approved in the past, there's no unique lot, there's no double frontage. They are living beyond their means. And I say that is, they want a bigger shed, they don't want to meet the setbacks, they don't want to lose their green space. My answer to that is, you said buyer beware again. What are your plans for that lot when you buy that lot? You know, or why are you buying a 30-foot camper when you only have a 20-foot shed? Type of deal.
I mean, we've had variances where somebody didn't want to cut down a tree.
Yes.
And so they can't meet their setbacks. Well,
And we are how do I say this, a warm and fuzzy council and a warm and fuzzy planning board, which is not wrong to be that.
Yeah.
But we always want to be neighborly, so we always say yes. I will tell you this, and I think Bill will back me on this, the day will come when we say no. We will. It's coming. And we will end up in court.
You know, and I see both sides. I understand that. I also understand the concept, or I'm very adamant about, you know, the personal and unfettered use of my own property. And so, yeah.
the thing that we've never had in Painesville, which you see a lot, I mean, if, you know, nobody who doesn't have to reads Court of Appeals cases from the state of Minnesota, but you know, in wealthier lake communities and metropolitan areas, you see a lot of cases where the council granted a variance and the city gets sued because by other adjoining property owners who are like, no, there's no way that met the criteria for a variance. And I think the league will tell you that a fair amount of the insurance premium money from municipalities gets spent on land use issues. I think it's one of the biggest things that get litigated in Minnesota is land use problems. Both sides of that equation, being people complaining that it was granted and it should have been, and people complaining that it was denied and it should have been granted. But, you know, it's a sticky area, but, you know, over the years, I don't think the city of Painesville has ever been sued over that issue, and the council's been very liberal in granting.
And I appreciate it because I've been the recipient of multiple variances.
Yeah.
You know, like, let's use yours for an example. The variance that you got for 3% of lot coverage, you know, because you wanted it. We should have denied that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, based on that worksheet that we go through every time, you know, it's kind of like, which box should I check so that this will get approved, you know? And I won't beat it to death, and I do appreciate the explanation. I just had a comment. I was wondering if...
I get it, it's wordy and,
Yeah, it does. It really is lengthy, but we've also moved to that you guys are filling that out now. You as a planning commission and you as a council are actually telling us as staff the reasons why and marking the boxes. So if we ever end up in court, you have to stand behind that and not me just speculating why you approved it.
And I get it, and that's a good thing. That brings me to the end of my statement.
That's it.
Okay.
Wow. We're done.
So then,
Well, then I was.
him and Sean were about equal in time.
let's do, does anybody else have anything specific they'd like to talk about? I kind of assumed that Bill and I would take up the most time.
We land on it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any specific concerns that we haven't addressed that we should?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead, Katie.
Since we are already going through a lot of very large changes within the zoning ordinance, I would like to see, this paper go, on page 4 to remove chickens.
No?
Under,
Repeat this line, I'm on page 4, so it's.
like, page 4.
Yeah, look at it on my phone.
If we're looking at redoing this, I feel like we should just take care of adding chickens in a way that is not going to be disrupting to our community.
So as we look at the animal definition in here, this was actually changed, what, 2 months ago when we met to go through the second round of revisions?
Yeah,
And it was,
3 months ago.
yeah, it was changed so that it was updated to fit the other definition of animal within the city. So that way we have the same definition wherever it's referenced. So the definition in here reflects where it's used in other places.
So unless we change the animal ordinance,
Yes.
we cannot change this one.
Right.
So if Katie is still adamant about you having chickens, we need to address it in the animal ordinance.
And I will say that the Policies and Procedures Board talked about that last week and is making the recommendation to not pass, not permit chickens in town, and we can discuss that outside of this forum. I don't know that it's particularly relevant to zoning.
Yes, I've been driving out to feed my chickens outside of town in negative 30-degree weather. And it's been very unpleasant, and I think of the board member who decided to try to table it for 4 years. So I would like to see that changed.
Okay, what else did you have, Katie?
Page 18, remove screen up to 80%.
What did she say?
I didn't hear, I don't.
Page 18,
Page 18.
we've already readdressed that one. We're going to change it to not less than 80%.
Yeah, Katie, and it.
Well, we changed it to not.
Oh, go ahead, Katie.
If you change it to not less than 80%, then you couldn't do a wire fence.
That's not.
So, hold on, yeah, it's not for residential. This paragraph 4 only applies to where a commercial or industrial land abuts a residential property. So like any homeowner that has residential on all sides could put up a chain link wire fence. This paragraph 4 only applies where there's a commercial abutting a residential or an industrial abutting residential.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
And the purpose is for screening.
Yeah, and the purpose there, like Jennifer just said, is to ensure screening.
So how does that work in mix when there's like so for example, downtown, where there's residential and then there's a commercial backed up to it? So like where Jean lives and Anthea is right behind them.
Yeah, so downtown is zoned commercial, so this would not apply there because it's commercial. Downtown is C1 commercial, and then AMPI, I think they're zoned industrial, yeah? Or no, they're actually,
No, they're industrial, but Jean living there is a secondary use. Her primary use is commercial. She chose to live in her facility.
Right. It's not residential.
It is not.
It's not zone, it's not zone.
We do have mixed uses, that Katie is 100%, but downtown district C1, the main reason for that district is commercial use. If you live above it, behind it, underneath it, that is accessory, that is something different.
Okay, thank you.
I thought one more thing. Somewhere I missed, in my notes, I missed the fact that we are trying to remove the opportunity for business owners to build a building and live in it in industrial. Did we touch on that? Did I miss my notes on that? I had called Mr. Nate Bork to get his opinion, because as the law currently stands, he is able to have a residential, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jennifer, a residential living space in his own building in industrial. And if I'm not mistaken, and I apologize, I somehow missed my note on that, but it is excluding, the verbiage for residence got removed from that, and I was gonna touch on that, and I must have missed my own notes. You thought we were done, didn't you? Sorry. Where would that be under? Would that be
So if we go to Article 1, and on page 65,
65?
and we just look under permitted uses,
65.
Light industrial?
and we look under accessory uses,
Yes, there's my note. Missing residences. And if I'm not mistaken, it currently is allowed, and we're trying to remove that option, and I have some concerns about that.
Where is
because
that?
I actually don't think it was allowed, he just did it.
I really think, I think you're wrong, Gene.
hold on.
What page is it on?
65.
Okay.
The current ordinance as a permitted use, it's B7, says residences when on the same parcel as the principal use and occupied by an individual employed by the principal use.
Right. So yeah, so it's legal now, and we are gonna make it illegal, or, you know, and I question that, because as a, you know, as someone trying to develop a business, and, you know, there are huge advantages to being able to live in your own structure and have that cost savings, and I guess mostly, with many of these laws, I say, why would it be, give me the bad parts, why would we not allow it?
well, a couple things come to mind. We don't provide any recreational services in industrial. We don't typically, maybe not yourself, Bill, but most industrial business owners would prefer not to have children biking up and down the streets. There's no sidewalks in the industrial park. We don't have parks up there for those. We don't want that congregation of families up there. Pure and simple safety.
Valid points.
And then they don't have to worry about the complaint also of noise, dust.
And I asked for, you know, and that part of it, I think, you know, it's again, kind of goes back to that buyer beware thing, where, you know, if you're gonna build a building in an industrial park and live there, then you should know better than to go to the city council and complain about noise. But I did not think about the children and the bicycling, and that's a valid point.
I'm confused. Is this industrial or light industrial, or what are we?
We're in light industrial.
Light industrial.
Do we not, is the cabinet guy not?
He's in,
That's zone commercial.
he's in C1, and
Okay.
by the way of the law, he needs a conditional use to live there.
Okay.
So at some point, he will be notified that he needs a conditional use and he will not like it.
Well, he's been notified of that before, I assume.
He's been told, the realtor has been told that, and he has been told that when he came for the conditional use.
Really?
But,
So he can rent, but he can't live there?
well, he's not even living there, he's not even renting yet.
But I'm just trying to understand, like, I thought that in C1, the rental portion was allowed to even
Well, so
work it out for employees of the old business owner or something.
And now it's a conditional use.
And the reason it's a conditional use, which was discussed a couple years ago, and most of this council was in existence then, is because of the parking issue.
Off-street parking.
So, you know, Jean's, if she were to add another apartment, she needs a conditional use. You know, because, like Jean just said a couple minutes ago, she has what, 1 or 2 parking spots, and she's got up to 4 apartments.
Okay. And you know what, that makes good sense. I guess I can understand the industrial component of yeah, you know, I'm okay with that. I wanted to make sure we all understood that wouldn't change.
And if I would have had any say back then when he would have been there, I would have been against it, but that was somebody else's part.
So any opposition to leaving the proposed ordinance as is, which would not permit residence in industrial? Okay.
The new one does not allow.
Does not allow,
Yes.
right.
Yep.
I have a question. Is he grandfathered in? Like, let's say he sold the building, the next
Yes.
guy couldn't live there?
If he sold it, no.
Correct.
But he can.
And for the record, we haven't had any, like, complaints from Nate either.
Bill, you're looking at me like that might have been wrong.
Can they get a conditional
I'm
use
just
to
trying
live
to think
there?
of-
I mean, I think if it's sold and there's a residence in the building,
They can continue.
it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, as long as, I mean, if somebody bought that business and they didn't use it for a residence for a year, if I remember the non-conforming use part, I think after a year, the non-conformity then is gone, but if they moved in and they said, hey, great, I got an apartment here, I'm the owner of the business, because they can't rent it out, but the owner could live there, because that's the pre-existing non-conforming use, is the owner of the property can live in that apartment.
So then the cabinet people would not need a conditional use.
Because it's always been,
Yeah, but no, because it wasn't permitted. He didn't run a business there, it was never permitted in the first place.
It wasn't
Yeah, it was-
they just lived there, knowing.
I'll let that one die. I just wanted to touch on that because Katie reminded me of it.
Yeah, so Katie, we didn't want to cut you off, and I'm sorry I forgot where we left off with your comments. Did you?
I'm sorry, I thought she was done. I apologize, Katie.
No, I just had one more thing. Light pollution, the only source of light pollution that I saw was like on page 34, covering signs. Is there another section in the document that covers light pollution?
I don't believe there is. No.
Not that I'm aware of, Katie, but the light pollution is in existence in the sign section because of all electronic signage that goes on. So if you'll notice on the section where we have churches, or we have those electronic signs on like for instance, both of our churches, there's hours where they can have them lit, and then they're supposed to shut them off so that we don't have that light pollution or the flashing and blinking in other people's bedroom windows during the night.
Okay, so what about in the event of, I'm talking about like upwards light pollution. So if you're in a parking lot, so if you're driving towards St. Cloud, there's a huge amount of light that is given off from cities, any large city that you come up across. And so adding to this ordinance something that would prevent light pollution from, say, a very large parking lot, you would make sure that any lights have kind of a cover over them so that the light is concentrated downwards as opposed to a wide array that goes all the way around it.
Well, like for instance, in the high school parking lot, that's always one of the questions that we do in a pre-construction review between Brad, Ron, the city administrator, the engineers, is we talk about lighting. And whether you want to call it light pollution or lighting, we encourage lighting for parking lots. Number one is safety. Safer. That's the number one reason is for safety. So we don't always ask them what type of shades they have on their lights per se, but why, I would think they would want those beams on their parking lot and not spread elsewhere. Do you have any more thing to add on there, Brad?
So is anybody familiar with light pollution and city planning as far as having the light go downward as opposed to a more radiant?
I am, yes.
Yeah. And I think another concern that I have when you raise that is what would prevent, if anything, what would prevent me from putting a number of yard lights in my backyard? That are also going to illuminate my neighbors.
Repeat that?
I just asked if there's anything that's going to prevent me from putting in some yard lights in my backyard that would also illuminate all of my neighbor's property in the process.
There is something in here about illuminating other people's property. I don't remember where it was, but that rings a bell though.
It's just under signs.
You're right. It is under signs. Yes.
If Sean came in and asked for a permit to put up 5 light poles in his backyard, first of all, it's going to cost him some dollars, and most people aren't going to do that. The other thing is, just the investment of putting them in, and also the investment of running them. But my first question I would ask is, what do your neighbors think about it, because they don't want to see it. So you have to adjust those lights so it'll only be on your property.
But if we wanted to do something that said that in our ordinance, I would think we would put it in the general requirements section. I mean, it's something we could look at. I understand the idea of not wanting, your neighbor's security light shining through your bedroom window. I'm sympathetic to that concern, but Katie's talking about something more, she's talking about projecting up.
Yep.
And more just to get it generally projecting downward, but I think both of those things could probably be addressed in general requirements, so you didn't have to put it in a million different places, but.
Maybe we could just have 2 paragraphs that want to, about the illumination and protecting the neighbors.
Right, if it's just a paragraph that says, all exterior illumination should illuminate only the property owner's lot and shall be aimed at the ground so as to not illuminate like the night sky or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
Come
but
on.
I'd be happy to look at something to address lighting, but I would think that's where it would most logically go, would be under the general requirements, that if you're gonna have lighting, that it should be lighting your property, not somebody else's, and it should be not projecting into the sky.
I wouldn't be opposed to looking into strobe lights either, because we have had some of those in our neighborhood and they are a health risk to some people.
Looks like we better do another paragraph on lights.
Well, it gets a little subjective too, because, any type of light, if the neighbor doesn't like it, they're gonna say, oh, look, there are rays of lights coming over here.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
So it gets tricky.
You might have to look at what some other places have done.
Yeah.
Now, I know by the high school, you cannot shine up because of the airport.
Can't? No?
As a Legion, when we wanted to light up the flags, it has to be up to the flag, and that was it.
Yeah, but that's something I'd be happy to.
I mean, it makes sense. Why would you want to project out to no man's land?
Well,
Flags.
Yeah, I might need to add a provision for exception of flags or something.
Even flags, they need to be just on the flag and not lighting up the whole yard.
I think,
Yeah, because some people put the light for the flag on the ground, so it has to project up, right? Some people put it on the top too.
Right.
I
But,
think out at the museum, we have it on the ground, going up on the flag.
Just
Katie, Katie, do you have anything else that you wanted to discuss?
Is there some way that could be put in before it goes farther?
Yep.
Could Bill go ahead and work on that?
Yeah, so my thought was, from here, now that we have the council and planning's approval, probably what would happen is Bill will draft up some language regarding the lighting piece. We can get that incorporated. Jennifer and Bill will incorporate all of the other things that we've talked about tonight, and then put it on the next planning agenda for planning to review and then send to council for final approval. And we should be, at this point, we should be pretty much good to go, but just to give it one more stamp of approval.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it can't go quite that, quick, because one of you entities has to hold a public hearing. And we need to be able to publish, so I guess what I would be looking for now is, are you gonna meet again jointly? And are you gonna hold a public hearing jointly?
I forgot about the public hearing piece. Thanks, Jennifer. If we need to have a public hearing, I guess I would prefer that we just all be part of that, rather than planning go through and approve it, and then council hold a public hearing and then change everything that planning has done.
So potentially then, if we were to make the changes that you guys have consented upon and added a paragraph or 2 on lighting, would you be in the position to set a joint planning council meeting tonight and the public hearing?
Why don't we just do it at the May planning meeting, the normal 6 o'clock time? Can we do it then?
That's,
Is going to be May 16th.
and I won't be here. Be out of town 4 days. So,
You should count yourself lucky, Gene, just,
That's true.
We could do it vice versa. We could hold it on the 23rd and hold the public hearing as a part of council and invite planning.
That's a good idea.
I
For the hearing.
know. Planning is made up of people who are graciously volunteering to serve the city. I'd rather, as a council member, we go to a planning meeting than ask planning to do one more meeting.
Whatever, to me, as one individual, I mean,
Okay?
zero issues.
Okay, Randy, do you have a preference?
I can make the 16th at an operation.
Oh, okay, so can you make it, what was the other day, the 23rd?
Well, it'll be a week later, so is that gonna work for you, Randy?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so why don't we just do it the 23rd then, and public hearing at 6:30?
May 23rd?
Monday, May 23rd.
6:30.
No, we only have to do the 10 members, we have to do
I'll double check, I think it's just,
6 p.m.
Yep, well, our meeting will start at 6.
We'll have a hearing at 6:30.
Yep, hearing at 6:30.
yeah, it's not.
Hear me, mine.
Month.
All right, I can, no, I can
What time? Well, let's see.
do it at
Yeah, I'll get it done.
night.
I'll get it.
Okay.
It's just gotta get done.
All right, so we will have a
Yeah.
joint planning board meeting then, and city council. Planning board will join us on our 23rd meeting. We'll plan to hold the public hearing at 6:30. So if members of the planning board want to have dinner or something first before joining us at 6:30, I would certainly understand that. With that, I think that concludes the new business that at least we had jointly. Bill, I don't know if you want to cover your informational stuff here, or...
Not unless I have to.
Hey, take note, there's a bunch of informational stuff at the end of the planning packet.
I should give Mr. Milhoff an opportunity if there's anything you need to touch on.
Okay. And then it looks like you guys are meeting next on the 16th.
I just want to personally thank everybody for listening to my rants and raves. Thank you.
Thank you for
On the
checking
16th.
it out.
Very helpful.